Mount up! We're coming!
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and we got some very interesting Minnesota Vikings news. I have decided boldly to rank some stuff, and Aaron Rodgers is back. So we've got a lot to talk about, but we've also got a lot of room, a lot of space, and sadly, I know that you guys don't have to get to a Minnesota Wild or a Minnesota Timberwolves game because they were both eliminated. So we could go on as long as we want with asking Vikings questions. I guess Vikings, you are up next now for the major men's teams. And off we go because I think I'm okay counting out the Minnesota Twins as a contender at this moment. I guess we'll see if they prove that wrong throughout the summer. But anyway, questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, and reactions to what we're going to talk about here. Welcome to just about anything that's on your mind. The Vikings will be starting OTAs in not too long and mini camps and so forth. So we'll have some news from those things. But for right now, we can just sit back and enjoy talking about the National Football League. So let's jump right into it. The biggest news of the day for the Minnesota Vikings is that ESPN sources tell Adam Schefter the 2028 NFL Draft will be awarded to Minneapolis at this week's league meetings. The NFL's fan engagement and major events committees have fan engagement and major events committees. Lots of committees working for the NFL have been working with the city and the Vikings on plans for the 2028 draft. So there you have it. The Vikings, who have wanted to do this for a really long time, is my understanding. I think the Wilfs have always believed that US Bank Stadium, Minneapolis, is a great place to host just about anything. The Super Bowl, outside of it being a little bit cold for some of the national writers that got stuck outside, the Super Bowl worked out pretty flawlessly in Minneapolis, and now they will host one of the biggest events on the NFL calendar in the draft. So here is the question that I have for you is, are you excited about this? Do you care? Do you want to go to a draft? Have you ever been to a draft? I mean, every draft that we've seen, it was right down the road in Green Bay. This year it's in Pittsburgh. They show Vikings fans, I'm assuming they're not paid actors, they show Vikings fans and the horns and everything else there. I am really curious. So if you've gone and you're listening to the show and in the comment section, jump in and tell me what it's like about attending the draft. I'm assuming that in 2028, I'll probably be doing a live show. I don't know if we could work it out any way to do it downtown somewhere or something like that to do the live show as the draft is going on. I think it's a very exciting event. And this is where I've changed a lot over the years, because if you had asked me like maybe 10 years ago when I was just taking the job covering the Vikings, how do you feel about the draft night? I probably would have told you it blows my mind that so many people are interested in the reading of names. And then when they started holding these huge events and, getting Detroit involved in Green Bay and Pittsburgh and, having all these fans come and so forth, I thought, you people are nuts. Why are you going and standing outside or whatever? I guess I assume they'll be inside at US Bank Stadium. Maybe not. I don't know what the setup's going to be, but either way, standing around listening for names. That's what I would have thought years ago. But the way that the draft has become its own singular Super Bowl of the offseason and the lead up to it, the interest in it, the amount that we have fun with it in the lead up now here on the show, I'm very excited for this. And I think that Minneapolis will do a great job with it, but I also really am impressed with the presentation that the NFL has put on over the years. And I know that last year maybe the broadcasts, I guess, that got behind the picks, and, people don't always love the analysis of this broadcaster, that broadcaster, whatever it may be. But if you just look from what the NFL has done about how they do the entire thing, it looks like it's going to be a lot of good fun and entertainment for people who show up. And now, with the fact that we have so much information about the draft, everyone knows every player, every mock, where guys are supposed to go. So it's real life drama. It's a stage show that they have created for every single year. It's like Broadway for football nuts. And I am very interested to see how it turns out in Minnesota, but it has sold me completely on the excitement of that night. And I would have said before, I would never attend a draft. Are you out of your mind? I have no idea why anyone would do that. And now I have switched sides to that and can't wait for 2028 when the Vikings get to host the draft. So any takes on that, or if you've had a chance to go, I'm very interested in just what that's like for people. I imagine you meet a lot of other people and there's things going on. I mean, the Super Bowl, you just walk through downtown and it was all sorts of like music, and there was the Super Bowl thing where you could go in and see the trophy and see I saw how a football was made. So the NFL has understood how to create a whole party around every event that it has. And I imagine they would do the same thing for downtown Minneapolis. Also, in terms of announcements today, the Minnesota Vikings announced that they will be holding joint practices with the Baltimore Ravens before their August 22nd preseason game. So the 19th and the 20th, the Baltimore Ravens will be coming to TCO Performance Center. And look, last year, the Vikings had a very good joint practice against the New England Patriots. They outperformed the Patriots, and I'm going to connect with Chad Graff from The Athletic, former Vikings beat reporter, now covers the Patriots, later on this week, and I'm sure we'll joke around a little bit about our reactions from the joint practices where the Vikings were clearly the better team, and then the Patriots ended up in the Super Bowl. We always have to put disclaimers on stuff like this, that practices do not predict the entire season. Training camps don't predict the entire season. All we can say is that JJ McCarthy completed a heck of a lot of passes against the Patriots and looked really good in those joint practices. And then, as we know, stumbled in the regular season, but still they mean a lot to Kevin O'Connell. And he treats the joint practices like that's his real preseason. Just like real preseason games, back when Mike Zimmer used to play his starters for the first half, they didn't predict the season either. Well, neither did two practices. But it adds a great intensity to have another team around. A lot of energy goes into those two practices. It feels like the true dress rehearsal, which used to be considered the third preseason game. But now the third preseason game is for guys who are going to be in the UFL or leaving the profession. And the joint practices are for the starters that, get going, in week one. So what I'm really interested to see just about the Baltimore Ravens in general is I've seen the Vikings play against Lamar Jackson. They did last year, and he was kind of banged up. But what does he look like up close? We've gotten to see Drake May up close and see his physical skill, which was on display last summer, and gotten to see Trey Lance when it wasn't going so good against the Vikings. And the joint practices are always interesting, and there's always something that happens that ends up being very memorable, even if, again, it doesn't predict the entire regular season. When you're looking for those flashes and things to hang on to for JJ McCarthy, that joint practice is one of them, that he performed so well in that environment. And I know the games mean so much more, but we have seen it. It's not like a Kellen Mond situation where it was not there at all. It was never there. There were no flashes. This is a little bit different. So my thing is, what will it look like at the quarterback position by the time they reach joint practices? And if they are having a true quarterback competition, this will tell us the answer to who won the quarterback competition, because they're not going to have the joint practices. They're not going to have their most important 2 days of the offseason for Kevin O'Connell where they're switching back and forth for first team reps. They're going to give the starting quarterback the opportunity to go against the other team's starters. And even last year, there was a little game planning that went back and forth between Mike Vrabel and the defense and Kevin O'Connell, then game planning after the first day of practice, and McCarthy performed better after that. So they put a lot of work into the joint practices. They're not having the competition go on then, I would not suspect. I would figure that whoever the quarterback is will be the quarterback for the first team reps for the joint practice. So it is a marker potentially. Now, if Kyler Murray comes out in week 1 of training camp and takes every single first team rep and never looks back, then we will not be talking about the quarterback competition on August 20th on day 2 of the joint practices. And I think that that is a fairly likely outcome. But if JJ McCarthy has a great spring and they feel like, yeah, we want to see him duke it out, and they're swapping back and forth first team reps all summer long, you know that Kevin O'Connell's not really going to have them resolve it in preseason games, but maybe there could be some of that in preseason games. And then this right here would be the spot where you really have to make a decision, because you're preparing for week 1 with these practices with the Baltimore Ravens. And it'll be a little weird with the Ravens being led by somebody else other than John Harbaugh. I'll be just very curious to see what that organization looks like. And at this time of year, just always looking forward to things that might be meaningful into the future for the Vikings. So those joint practices, of course, I will be there for them on August 19th and 20th. And you know, we'll see what we have then. But I don't think just because last year did not turn out the way it was supposed to turn out, even though McCarthy had a great joint practice, I don't think it means nothing just because of that. But I am going to vow right now to you guys, and you can check me in the comments if I break my rules, that I will not make too much of it, because I probably did last year. So a couple other things here. I'll get you a FanDuel question of the day. So speaking of the quarterback competition, FanDuel has released odds on the Vikings quarterback competition. Right now, Kyler Murray is minus 1,000 to start week 1, JJ McCarthy plus 600, and Carson Wentz is plus 7,000. You never know with a couple guys with injury histories, I guess. But here's what I want to know, where you stand on this, because the idea of a quarterback competition, we've bandied it about a little bit on the show. I don't think that there's any real arguments that are going on out there. I don't see the internet going to war every single day of Murray versus JJ McCarthy. I think there's a handful of people who are kind of hanging on, but it doesn't really make common sense that they would sign Murray unless they wanted him to be the starting quarterback, and the odds are reflective of that. But plus 600 is not that far out, still giving JJ McCarthy some credit. So here's my FanDuel question of the day. You probably fall into 2 categories with this idea of the quarterback competition between Murray and McCarthy. Have you either become A, intrigued with Kyler Murray to the point where you're good with him starting, or B, you want to see a true competition? So have you spent the year, and look, if you've listened to me a lot, then you probably are falling into category number A, because I've watched a lot of the film, because I've done the data breakdowns. I've brought it to you guys, the numbers on Kyler Murray and the film analysis that I've done on Kyler Murray. And the strengths and weaknesses are certainly there, but I think that there's a lot more potential for Kyler than is being talked about around the NFL. You see it a little bit. There was somebody on TV that mentioned the other day that they feel like, ESPN, one of their shows, that they feel like Murray is going to play his best football in Minnesota. And that's exactly how I feel. And I really feel that he was let down by his supporting cast and his franchise, and that the talent is through the roof, the motivation. I heard Blake Cashman on Jim Rome's show today talking about how Murray went to the Minnesota Wild game with everybody and has been connecting with his teammates. There's always been this kind of fascination with Kyler's personality, because he doesn't have a typical walks around like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning kind of demeanor to him. But I don't think that it means he's a bad teammate. So he's kind of making those connections early on right now. But in terms of his actual performance, what he's had the coaching, the franchise, the receivers, the running games, it's basically never come together entirely. The closest it came was 2021, but it's never all been on point at the same time. And the Vikings have the best chance that he's ever had, I think by a mile, to bring it all together around Kyler Murray. So if you've listened to me talk about that and sort of gather all the evidence together, you might fall into category B, but I'd be curious to hear from some people about the argument for wanting to see a true competition between Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy. So that is your FanDuel question of the day. Either A, you are intrigued enough with Kyler to be excited about him being the Vikings quarterback, or B, you want to see a true competition. And then there's always a few of you who just think nothing will ever work ever, and I didn't put that in there. So that's not in the FanDuel question of the day. All right, couple quick things, and then I'll read your responses, your reactions, the draft stuff, the joint practices, and FanDuel question of the day. But Aaron Rodgers is back, my friends. Isn't that what we all needed in our life? We needed Not really. We didn't really need more Aaron Rodgers. He signs a one-year deal officially today with the Pittsburgh Steelers to come back. And the reason that I included this in the rundown is, one, I'm going to include some more around the NFL stuff in the rundowns just in general because it's May and it will then be June and then it will be early July, which means that, there's no football games or not a lot of practices going on. So we're going to talk about other stuff, but it did come to my mind with Aaron Rodgers. Do you remember last year? Remember 365 days ago, where right now I was sitting in the same chair talking about, should the Vikings get Aaron Rodgers? Is this real? Is this report real? How close are they to actually getting Aaron Rodgers and not playing JJ McCarthy? And I have to wonder a little bit, you could throw this in the comments if you have a thought on this too, is what it actually would have looked like if Aaron Rodgers had played for the Vikings last year. Because late way through the season, when Pittsburgh was en route to making the playoffs and the Vikings were starting out their season 4-8, I probably at one point cracked a little and said, why didn't you just get Aaron Rodgers? I'm sure that I did, because the quarterback performance was so poor and it was so frustrating to watch JJ McCarthy go through it and Carson Wentz get injured and Max Brosmer not ready to play in the NFL. And it's just like, man, if they just had Rodgers, they would be this, and this. And I think at the end of the day, Rodgers against the Houston Texans pretty much made it clear to us that he doesn't have the physical skill anymore to lead a team deep into the playoffs. And it would have been really difficult for Rodgers, even as good as the Vikings were last year as a supporting cast, to take them any deeper than the divisional round. And they end up with the 18th overall pick. They end up with, think about how this ends up going, like a quarterback competition between Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy. But what happens if Rodgers played for the Vikings last year, won 2 more games for them, and they win 11? Because, he was an average-ish quarterback last year, probably a little below average, but with below average play in the Vikings defense, they at least get to 10, but maybe they get to 11. So if they get to 11 wins with Aaron Rodgers last year, he and Jefferson click pretty well. He's still slinging it all right. I don't know if they would have been able to protect him. That's one thing with all the O-line injuries that they had, but he was getting rid of the ball super quick. And the defense turned a corner in the second half of the season, turned out to be great. So let's say that you win 10 games and get into the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers, and you don't really go anywhere in the postseason. Maybe you win one, maybe you get eliminated in the wild card round. Like, how would we feel right now? Because I think that the excitement level, because Rodgers stayed healthy for the entire year last year, so that would have meant JJ McCarthy on the bench. If they were winning, then McCarthy would have been on the sideline developing. And right now, we would be talking about, okay, it's time to turn things over to JJ McCarthy. Here we go, off into the future. He got the year that, he had a setback, but he had the year of development behind Aaron Rodgers. And I think the excitement level surrounding the Minnesota Vikings would be through the roof, because even though you had your dream delayed a little bit to have the rookie quarterback contract, is Kwesi still here? is Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah still here if they had executed this plan to get Rodgers and play him for a season and then turn things over to JJ McCarthy? Or would they still have said it's dysfunctional inside the front office? Or, I guess they didn't technically use the word dysfunctional, but all the reporting that we did, functional would not be my description. So just like, would he still be here? And would everyone be waiting, including Kwesi, to see how it played out with JJ McCarthy? I mean, that's really fascinating to think about what might have happened if Rodgers was the quarterback for the Vikings. And I think what we would have been saying if they went 10-7 and they lost in the wild card round with Rodgers is that was a waste of time. We should have been finding out about JJ McCarthy. What's another 10-win season to the Minnesota Vikings, right? And I mean, honestly, they did find out a lot about JJ McCarthy. They found out how far away he was from being a starting quarterback, what they needed to do toward the end of last year with changing the offense around to make it easier for him to run and so forth. They found out about his risk taking, his propensity for turnovers and sacks, but also they did see some flashes of things that he did well down the stretch, the Dallas game, the Detroit game, but they knew exactly where he was at because of that. I think now, how much farther would he have been along, though, from a technical perspective to start? Like, what would his odds be of having success? Would they even have gone to get Kyler Murray? Probably not, right? I don't think there's any chance they're talking about Kyler Murray. So Rodgers not ending up with the Vikings has this very interesting butterfly effect of where we've landed with Murray, who has a chance to become the Vikings' long-term quarterback, or at least, 5 years into the future, if he performs really well this year. It's a fascinating decision. It's one of those that in the moment that, okay, whatever you decide here, it's going to take you down two paths. Like, you've come to the fork in the road and you're either Rodgersing or you're not. And the Rodgers thing would have probably been overall pretty crazy. And following that along week to week would have been nuts. And just seeing how he responded to everything would have been fascinating, and the ups and downs that he had last year. But at the end of the day, it would have been a cool journey, but you didn't really get anywhere. It would have been like walking around the park in a circle and going back to your car. Like, you just didn't really gain any ground. Everyone just got older, and there was value in you. The ground that you gained last year was knowing exactly where JJ McCarthy stands going into this year. You would have known nothing about that. But in the other universe, in the alternate Rodgers verse, you would have had JJ McCarthy developing so much more, all of the things that he needed to do to be a starting quarterback, which may have increased his odds of actually succeeding once he got in. So here's a question for you. Would it have been better if they signed Rodgers? If you think of it from those terms, because I may have just kind of convinced myself that it might have been. Now, look, if Murray's phenomenal, then no, it would not have been better, because they don't end up on Murray under this scenario. But having JJ McCarthy behind the scenes working every day on throwing technique, having him work on getting just better and better, running the offense, really mastering what it means to be an NFL quarterback, and then improving his ability to just straight up throw and get on the same page with receivers from an entire year and then another training camp now to work on it. It would have given McCarthy better odds to step right into the NFL. And I don't think, in my opinion, that JJ McCarthy is going to be an NFL failure long term, but it was a failure last year to throw him right into the mix. That's an interesting one. Interested in your takes there. And last thing before I get to your questions and comments, I ranked all the Vikings opposing quarterbacks in terms of degree of difficulty. So I'm going to give you my list, and you can tell me if you like it or not. So here's my list for Vikings opposing quarterbacks now that the schedule is out. Number 1 is a shocker. It is Josh Allen at the top of the list. I don't think that has any explanation. The last time he was here, he jumped over Anthony Barr. And after that, he's just been a great quarterback in the NFL. There's been some bumps, but he is as good as it gets. Drake May is number 2, runner up to the MVP. I know that there were schedule-related reasons that he was in that MVP running, but You take a team to the Super Bowl in year 2, you get to be very high on this list. So I put Jordan Love 3 and Jared Goff 4, not because I think that Love is better than Goff. I think that Goff is actually better. Here's a crazy stat for you. I mean, Jared Goff has now had 5 straight seasons of top 5 offenses. I mean, when is the last time the Vikings had a top 5 offense? Seriously, is it Favre? I honestly don't even know. It must be, right? Was the last time they had a top 5 offense. He's done it 2021 through 2025. So I would have him, if you were doing an all quarterback ranking, higher. But I think that what happened last year and the fact that they don't have Ben Johnson and they don't have Frank Ragnow, I think that Goff versus the Vikings is just more human. So I put Love ahead of him because I think he's more physically gifted. 5 is Brock Purdy. Brock has lost both games at US Bank Stadium against the Vikings and played his butt off. Thrown for a ton of yards, made a ton of plays. He has become, I think, a really good quarterback in the NFL, and he is not easy to beat, and they have the best offensive mind in the league. 6 I have is Caleb Williams. We know that it's been up or down versus the Vikings, but he's had 3 good performances overall out of 4 games versus the Vikings in his career. He's a pain in the butt to play against. He runs you all over the field. So he is number 6. Number 7 is Jaden Daniels, who I'm assuming is going to bounce back and not look like he did last year against the Vikings with a new offensive coordinator and being presumably just healthy. And but they have not added a ton of weapons to their offense, which would be a little concerning. I would have him higher because of that. I mean, NFC Championship just 2 years ago, but I think he still belongs very high on this list. Baker Mayfield is number 8. Which Baker do you get? Do you get the crazy, excellent Baker that's the first 8 games of last year, or the Baker that goes 2-7 down the stretch and they miss the postseason? Nobody knows. Number 9, Daniel Jones, I think is kind of a product of his run game last year and offensive line and even some receivers, but still showed that he could be dangerous on a given week. Number 10 is Bryce Young, the ultimate game manager, has never really put up big numbers, even though he's made a lot of progress. Still only averaged 6.3 yards per attempt, but there's so much uncertainty for the rest of the list. This is where it kind of turns. The first 9 guys are pretty proven and you know what they are. And then 10, Bryce Young, I still don't feel like I have a great feeling for Bryce Young. Tyler Shuck is number 11. I don't know what Tyler Shuck is at all. He's only played, 9 games last year. Was pretty good. And is he anything more than that? I don't know. 12 is Malik Willis, who I think is more talented than a lot of the other guys at the bottom of the list, but he's playing for the Miami Dolphins, so that's why he's number 12. They have done nothing to help him with the weapons other than keep Devon Achane. 13 is Geno Smith. I'm not really buying a total bounce back. I do think the Jets are massively improved, and he has his ups and downs, but he is into his 30s now, coming off a year where he got hit 55 times. It's pretty tough. And 14th is the Falcons with either Michael Penix Jr. or Tua as the quarterback. So there is your opposing quarterback list. Now, what is on your mind? Let's, why don't we jump right in to your questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, anything that's on your mind. Doesn't have to be stuff that I've thrown out there. What are you guys thinking for tonight? So let's get into it. All right, we'll start off with the BD97, who says, why would Chad Alexander pull out of an interview for a promotion? Oh, that's a good question. You know, I probably should have had that in the rundown too, but I wasn't really shocked by it. Yeah, so if you didn't hear, Chad Alexander, who was one of the Vikings GM candidates, the AGM of the Los Angeles Chargers, formerly worked in his background with the Baltimore Ravens. He decided that he did not want to be in the running for the Vikings general manager position. So Chad Alexander has not announced or said why he decided to pull out, but we can speculate on a couple of potential reasons. The number one reason might be the structure that the Vikings are looking for. It might be that he feels like even he wants to wait and see what other opportunities are there next year. He might not think that he has a great chance to get this job, so he just decided to kind of remove his name early from that. But I don't know. I mean, I think if you kind of go down, tinfoil hat land, you could say, well? Does he feel like he has to share the power and things like, but all that stuff is relevant. Like the way that the Wilfs are going to go about this and what they're going to tell candidates is going to dictate those candidates' interest in the Vikings position. Because if you're somebody like that and you're working for a very high profile franchise that's got a franchise quarterback and is having success, and you're thought of as kind of next man up as a GM candidate, I mean, you want to make sure that you're picking the right position because you don't get multiple shots at this. Like the odds that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah becomes a GM again are not very high. The example I like to use is Thomas Dimitrov, who was a really good general manager for the Atlanta Falcons and has not gotten a sniff of another opportunity. I did a story a couple weeks ago with Doug Whaley, former Buffalo Bills GM and worked for Pittsburgh, and overall did a good job in Buffalo, got them back to relevancy, got them back to the playoffs when they had been horrible. He gets let go after they make a coaching change, and then McDermott wants to work with his guy who ultimately fired him. Strange. And Whaley, you would have thought, just by the fact that he had turned around a franchise that had gotten itself into position to be relevant and back in the playoffs, that he would have gotten another sniff. Never. No, he's working with the UFL now. So if you're Chad Alexander, and this is just not any information I have about why he decided to take his name out of the running for the Vikings, I think that you want to make sure it's a great fit for you and it's a great structure for you. And if there's questions about who has final say, decision-making, something like that, it might influence your reason to do it or not do it. But that's all I can throw out there because I don't know if that's why Chad Alexander pulled his name out of it or if he decided that he wasn't ready for it or if he just wants to stay with the Chargers because he likes that position. I don't know. But there probably is a reason, and there's only so many reasons that you could come up with that someone would pull out of that position. So that is interesting. AP Carlin, bold idea. Let's take the number one pick for 2028. Yeah. So you mean like try to, tank. Yes. Okay. It's a typo. Let's tank for the number one pick in 2028. Well, as it relates to GM candidates, that one thing the general manager candidates for this Vikings job are going to be told is that you're not going to have the number one pick or you won't be the general manager for very long, which I think for a lot of you and for me has always been, for a lot of you, people will just say, look, man, like tank, let's do this. For me, it's a little more delicate than that because when you have a certain level of coach, when you have a certain level of wide receiver and the money that you spend on the roster, it's way easier for us to say, dude, just go get the number one pick, put anyone in at quarterback, lose, man. Like that's way easier to do than it actually is when you have all these players who are good. And yeah, you could say, well, get rid of them all, but Jefferson is the guy that you can't really get rid of, or you really don't want to, because he is still one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. And he's somebody that you want to be your Larry Fitzgerald, tape to tape, play his entire career here, go in the Ring of Honor, all that sort of stuff. And that outcome is hard to achieve if you have a season where you go 2-15 or something and you tear every part of the roster apart and then lose. And if you're Kevin O'Connell, you're not surviving that. So you're going to fight tooth and nail all the way to the end. It's one of those things that's a lot easier to do on a video game. And it's why, your Clevelands and Arizonas and Jets and Raiders, these teams that have been perpetual jokes, they end up there at the top. Now, the teams that tanked, some of them have turned it around pretty quick. Chicago, Detroit, I will always believe that that's going to be the best place to get the top talent, but this team is not going to buy into it. We'll be interested to see where they do end up drafting in 2028, but I would guess that trading away the first round pick for somebody is probably off the table for that. Joker says, sounds like they didn't consult ESPN or anyone involved in TV with the decision. Now what? The commercials play during the Packers picks. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah. So, that did happen last year, and it does seem to have happened a few times where the Vikings were on the board and they would go to the commercials and so forth. So You guys will get to see your pick for sure. You'll get a big presentation with your pick being the home team in 2028, and maybe they will do that. Maybe they will go and cover up the Packers picks. I don't know. Probably not. But I think Minneapolis is a great place to do this. I have no idea what the setup is going to be like. Is it going to be inside US Bank Stadium, or is it going to be more of an outdoor setup somewhere downtown? And I'm not really sure where that's going to be. Like, do they shut down a street? Do they? I don't know. Like, that whole situation is pretty fascinating. I mean, they didn't do it inside of other stadiums. I think it's always just been a downtown setup. And I know I saw some people saying, well, how is this possible? And where are they going to put it? I mean, they obviously have an idea. I don't think that they decided on this today and then went, oh man, where are we going to put it? But I'm very intrigued to see how that ends up working out, and a little bit concerned about the weather. I mean, maybe it would be cool if it was inside US Bank Stadium. I don't know the logistics or how you go about that, but indoors for Minnesota does tend to make more sense for stuff. But I'll be curious to see. The BD97, yes, excited, never been to a draft, and you're moving to the area. Oh, cool. From Arizona to here, just for the summer. Would like to take my son to the experience and experience it as Minnesota Vikings fans. Well, that's cool. And I think that as for fans, this thing has been really well orchestrated. Now, the people who are there on day 3, just mingling around in the 6th round, there I'm kind of like, okay, man, go home. This is they are drafting players who never played football before and had some sort of great international combine in the 7th round. So you can just kind of call it a day. But the energy of that first night is crazy. And I imagine that everybody who's in the stands or whatever it is, the setup, who is witnessing this, that between, the music and Roger Goodell is there and the players are there and everybody, walking out and stuff and all the fan base is gathering together, it's got to be a pretty cool event. So I am figuring that a lot of people will have a really good time doing it, unless it's 4 degrees, which you never know. I suppose it could be. Joker, the draft is a cool event. All the fans, teams getting together is special. Doesn't happen often. Will be a great time in Minnesota. I think the same thing. SWAT says would love to make the trip from California to Minnesota. I assume you mean for the draft. Would rather go to a Super Bowl. Obviously, yes. Mike, I guess you've been, said the drafts are cool. You meet a lot of weird people. Yeah, the people who dress up in the full Ragnar type of look with the horns and everything else, respect, because you're clearly very serious about this, and we would not have the degree of the sports success and as much fun as we have if people weren't crazy about it. But also that's a lot much when people do that. But you're only doing it once. It's like it's a stage show and it's Halloween kind of all at the same time. And when the Super Bowl was here, you could go downtown, and that was very cold that week, but you could go from place to place. Like, they had all these, I don't know what to call them, huts, houses, warm areas to go in and out of to see lots of different stuff. And there were people playing music and whatever else. It was a really good time. It's really a festival type of situation that I'm sure that they'll do a good job with, and it will be a lot of fun, but there will also be a lot of weird people. Kit, haven't been to the draft itself, but it was fun when it was hosted in Chicago. Lots of cool events and attractions in the city in the week or so before the first round. Yeah, right. And that's what I mean, is that when it's happening, it's like the city kind of galvanizes to create a lot of different stuff to get people down into the area. And look, every single city is going to overstate how many people were there. There was a thing I watched in Pittsburgh where if you went to day 1 and day 2, you were 2 people. You were 2 different. So they said, well, this number of people showed up, but you're 1 person and you showed up twice, but they counted you, right? So like, sometimes those numbers can be a little bit inflated. And I think that some of the drafts have come short maybe of expectation on hotel sales and how many fans were coming in and everything's like that. because they try to pump it up as much as possible. But I do think that they will put a ton of effort into making it someplace that people from Minnesota, from Minneapolis, St. Paul, and around the state want to come and see, just for the pomp and circumstance of the entire thing. Is that Raff Cave? Says never been to a draft. Now I can go to a draft. Yeah, well, there you go, right? Like that. Why would you go all the way to Green Bay? Who would want to make that drive anytime? But, not to go to Lambeau, right? You're going to save your trips to go to Lambeau. Pittsburgh's pretty far away, not the best flight situations. Like, this is your opportunity, if you're Vikings fans, to see what the draft is like. And I really think that the draft has just become something that people are so knowledgeable about. And that's what amazes me doing the show every single year is I'll say, I'm trying to do a draft sim and I'm into the 4th round and I'm not sure. And you guys will be jumping in the comments being like, well, why aren't you taking this guy, you dope? Because people are so knowledgeable about the draft that when the names are revealed, it is dramatic. It is surprising, shocking, interesting every single time now. And I think maybe years ago, where if you were sort of casual about it, maybe you heard Mel Kiper on TV, maybe you grabbed a draft magazine, Pro Football Weekly or something. But now, you are inundated with so much draft coverage that everybody has opinions on it and thoughts and feelings. So when you show up there, it's a totally different experience than if they had held this, 25 years ago. Jeremiah says, agree on the Super Bowl parade, but exciting that the cities get to host a draft. Well, of course, yeah, the Super Bowl parade is something that, cannot be replicated by anything, cannot be replicated by holding a Super Bowl, can't be replicated by a concert, a draft, nothing would ever match that. And maybe someday for you folks, but you're going to come from North Dakota, or you can, that's cool. The BD97 says, iron sharpens iron. I assume you are referring to the joint practices, having a good franchise in here. KOC was in love with watching Drake May. Yes, that's true. Jeremiah, if I do a live show in some way, and I'd have to figure out how to do that from the actual draft, from the events, then yes, I will see what I can do about having fans stop by for that. I'll do my best. It will be Carson Wentz. You guys are funny. The BD97, those practices should have been a sign of things to come for McCarthy. Well, the thing about the joint practices is that it is a more aggressive version of the practices. They are very physical, and the teams are trying their best to plan for each other a little bit. But there is nothing that ever is going to indicate what NFL football is going to be like, right? And McCarthy could look good in practice, but that's not the same as walking out in front of 70,000 people with how many people watching, the noise, the pressure, all that sort of stuff. It's just a totally different experience. It's sort of singing in the shower versus singing on stage. It's like, yeah, it's great that you can do it practicing at home, but it's not the same, even if you get another team in there. And those practices, they are meaningful to KOC. They are meaningful for looking at different things, how you're using players, or who you want to make your last cut, or I don't know, did they trade Harrison Phillips in part because of things that they saw there? I'm not sure, but decisions get made based on those joint practices. But it's not an NFL game in the regular season. Those guys are at a practice. They're not able to kill you, and the complexity of things that you have to know, you don't get another rep. Like we drop back, we kind of messed it up, we'll just try it again. Well, that doesn't, in the real game, you get destroyed by a defensive end. So you could take things out of the joint practices, but we shouldn't have equated so much as we did. And I am admitting guilt. I am on the stand saying, Your Honor, I'm guilty of doing this, of making that into a projection for what would happen with JJ McCarthy. And then it just wasn't. It was a very rough first 3 quarters of his season, and then it was an unbelievably rough second week. And we saw more of what McCarthy looked like as it went along. And maybe it would have gotten there a lot quicker had he not gotten hurt in week 2 and could have just progressed and led the team overseas against Pittsburgh and Cleveland, and maybe you win two. Or, you split those. Maybe you play well in one of them, get some confidence going to come back with. But that just is not how it ended up playing out. And that's the hard part about something like a practice in general or a joint practice is how are you supposed to know when someone's going to get hurt in the season? If you told me before the year, joint practices, training camp or not, or whatever, if you said, yeah, McCarthy's going to miss 5 weeks after getting hurt in week 2, I would have said, uh-oh, like, that's really bad. Because that would be the worst scenario, is that he has to be shelved for a really long time and then lose all the momentum that he built up and the confidence from training camp and then start at square one over again and then gets hurt again and then has to start at square one over again. Like, that's one of the main reasons I think he struggled so much. And when you haven't played back-to-back games, I mean, it adds up. It is the battle of attrition thing is absolutely real. Mentally, emotionally, physically, all those things. I mean, it's really tough to play a game against the Packers. And if he had gone to Seattle, I mean, my God, he might have not played football again after that if he had gone to Seattle, but he didn't play against Seattle. But you play that Green Bay game and they just stomp your face into the ground, which happens to every quarterback ever in the NFL. But that's a hard thing when you have not built up many reps. And I don't mean from a concussion standpoint. I just mean from a physical beating type of standpoint. Anybody with a concussion should not be playing until they're completely ready. But you understand what I'm saying is, like, NFL quarterbacks who are veterans, they know how to avoid certain hits, and they also build up their body and their tolerance, and they build up their knowledge. So every week isn't, climbing up this huge mountain of information because they know so much of it from playing in the NFL before. So I think that really, really hurt it. And that's why, if you told me that he stayed healthy, and if that had happened in a different universe, if he stayed healthy, then I would have said he would have had a much better season through those few weeks. But that really ended up setting him back big time. And kind of made the whole training camp irrelevant because he managed that training camp pretty well. They had Jefferson out. They were playing Lucky Jackson, who I see now in the UFL. And Lucky's a great dude, so I hope it works out for him. But he's not Justin Jefferson or anywhere close. And, he did a good job in that training camp. But it was all negated when you had to sit down for 5 weeks and couldn't really do anything because of an ankle injury. So you're right that, those practices probably should have been a sign of things to come for McCarthy and just didn't work out that way. Joker says, really boggles my mind that real people actually believe Coller signed with the Vikings to sit on the bench behind the 42nd rated quarterback. Well, Joker, I'm on the same page with you. Just overall with Kyler Murray signed here to completely change what people think about Kyler Murray. That's why he's here. That even just the little bit that you hear is the motivation factor is through the roof with Kyler. I've always heard this about him. This was even before he was on the radar for the Vikings. And one of the reasons that I was intrigued is that he is extremely competitive. And even when he gets made fun of for, he video games or whatever, and I've kind of gone on that rant before because lots of athletes play video games, and he's also a very good chess player too. Which if he was just that, it would be how interesting. He's so good at chess. But all this stuff is like competition junkie type of stuff. And this is somebody who is considered the best quarterback in the state of Texas to ever play high school football there in the high school football state of Texas. I mean, he is a super competitor. And I think that led to some of the stuff with him on the sideline and him with Cliff Kingsbury and everything else, which I didn't see with Jonathan Gannon, by the way. I've watched now every game since 2024, and I haven't seen any of that, like the body language stuff. And if there was an incident, it wasn't on the tape, and maybe it was like in a post game or something. But under Gannon and Drew Petzing, I think he really got along with them quite well. So it may have been just you wear out your welcome with somebody like Cliff Kingsbury eventually, or miscommunication that we're all trying to read body language on the sideline when we don't know what's actually being said, whatever it might be. The point is that Kyler Murray, yes, he signed here with the full intent to prove everyone wrong about Kyler Murray and to take this Vikings team into the playoffs, to show he can win in the playoffs, to basically do what Sam Darnold did for the Seattle Seahawks last year. I don't know if they have enough to get deep into the postseason with Murray, but certainly offensively, weapons-wise, coaching-wise, now that they have started to take the running game more seriously this offseason, offensive line-wise, if it stays healthy, they could be serious with Kyler Murray, and that's why he's here. So, yes, you're exactly right. And not to mention that it's also better for J.J. McCarthy to get the development time. So that's why I've continued to stay. I don't think that we're going to be going back and forth in training camp with first-team reps. I think it's going to be Kyler's show and then see where it goes from there. And if he's banged up, J.J. better be ready. And J.J. better show that he knows the offense just as well as Carson Wentz, because no more excuses. You're in year 3. There is no more excuses for J.J. McCarthy. It's not, I'm young. It's not, oh, I'm just learning. I gotta, whatever. It's no, you have to know the offense just as well as a veteran like Carson Wentz in year 3 in the NFL. And he's got to show that. So that those are they're just people in two different worlds. It's Kyler Murray, this veteran quarterback who's had some great seasons. I'm not all pro, but Pro Bowl caliber seasons, really good in the NFL. Top 15. And then there's a quarterback who's just getting to the point in his career where there are serious expectations for him to know what he's doing out there and to be able to throw the football accurately and so forth. So that's just two very different wavelengths for those quarterbacks. And that's why, similar to you, I just don't see it as being a situation where it would be a competition, not to even mention the KOC part of it, where he's getting one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the entire NFL, which would seem to play to his favor. Swat says, what's your thoughts on Max Bredesen now that you've seen him in person? So I mean, it was only rookie minicamp, so I can't say that I saw a lot of Max Bredesen. I wasn't really looking for him. Usually in rookie minicamp, you're watching wide receivers and corners, and that's it. Because the offensive linemen are doing drills, the defensive linemen are doing drills. And if I told you that I was capable of watching a guy do a drill with a bag and knew whether he was good or not, I would be a liar. I'm not. I'm just not that good. I'm sorry. I'm not a coach. I can't go back and watch it a million times and figure out the small detail of whatever they're doing. But I can watch wide receivers and corners move around and figure out pretty well, is there anything there? So those are the guys I was watching. And Damon Claiborne running routes and catching the ball was pretty impressive too. So I didn't see a lot of Max Bredesen, and I don't know that I'll get a huge sense for him really in OTAs and minicamp, what he's going to look like, because the physical play is not going to be there. They're not in pads. They're not hitting. But I think from watching his games back, which I have watched through highlight reels of him and, plays he was involved with and stuff, he just reminds me a lot of David Morgan. He's a very physical guy who can catch the ball if you throw it to him and he's open. So it's not like he can't catch it at all. And he can get some yards after catch and so forth, but he is going to seek out physical contact. And he really has this way about just like latching on when he gets there. So I'm actually thinking that Bredesen is going to play a fairly big role. And I'm talking like 15 to 20% of the snaps. I'm not talking about, 80% that we're going to go back to 1997 or something. But it gives the Vikings just this little extra spice to their offense, because everyone is just having this, freak out over how the Rams use 3 tight ends. But if you have Josh Oliver, TJ Hockenson, and Max Bredesen in the backfield, that's basically like having 13 personnel. It's just having instead 22. And no one, I guess, if you don't run it all the time, is going to give you a huge amount of praise. But being multiple, I think, is the toughest thing in the NFL to face as a defense. You line up and you don't know going into a game, are they going to have the fullback on the field for 5 plays or 25 plays? They're going to have Josh Oliver out there. It might be matchup to matchup. It allows you to play in multiple different ways, I think, when you have a Bredesen. So it's a lot for a guy right away. And he may have to do some pass protection. That's not going to be easy for him because he could deal with the physical contact, but the mental part of it could be tough. Everything I've heard about Bredesen, though, is that all that stuff, he checks a lot of boxes. So I am very interested, of course, in seeing how it plays out with him on the offense. Joker says a guy on Reddit charted QB throws with no pressure and throwing to an open receiver. McCarthy was 43rd out of 43 in completion percentage. That's way too much work for a stat that already exists, which is kind of funny for the Reddit guy. Now, I mean, watching football and charting it is a good time, but that's completion percentage over expected really would have done that for him. And what completion percentage over expected is exactly what you just described, which is the distance between a receiver and a defender in the tracking data, because all the guys have the tracking things in their pads, will present a possibility of that being a completion based on all other throws with that distance from the defender. So if you run a slant route and you are 5 yards ahead of the guy, your completion percentage is probably 80%, right? If you miss that throw, that would be the on the negative side, right? If you have 2 feet of separation from your defender in the back of the end zone and you throw the perfect ball and the guy goes up and makes a grab in the back of the end zone for a touchdown, the completion percentage might have been 30% and you hit it. So that's 100% for you. That's how it works. Completion percentage over expected. And McCarthy was at the bottom of the league. Yeah. I mean, look, we don't have to really relitigate it. I see people trying to do it now and then like, well, no, it was better than you think. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Like the numbers don't go away. It's really about how far it can go from here. There's no question what it was. It's what it can be. And what it can be with McCarthy with proper technique improvement, which he's still young and you can do, and we've seen other guys do it. But I think that really timing is the main thing. And training camp probably did set him back in some ways, not having the timing with Justin Jefferson. Timing is a very hard thing to go from college to the NFL because you can't wait for guys to get open. It's got to be bang and then bang. Like hit the foot, ball is out. If it's not, you're too late and you got to do something else. And that's a hard thing to grasp in a practice, in a joint practice. You only grasp that when you're actually out there. And the thing is with McCarthy, he's a good playmaker, but he's not Murray and he's not Cam Newton and he's not Josh Allen. So it wasn't like he could be that behind when it came to the timing and then just make something happen and get 15 yards anyway. He did it occasionally, but not enough to even out how inaccurate he was. So yeah, I mean, whether you're a Reddit guy who's tracking a million different things or just any number that you look at, the quarterback rating being the same through 10 games as Christian Ponder is very concerning. So he's got to prove that all those numbers were because of circumstances last year and not who he's really going to be. And he's young enough to have that opportunity to do it. Jeremiah rather have Kyler be the day one starter and no competition and JJ sit and learn from Murray and Carson Wentz. I think that's very fair. I do. I think that that's very fair because Kyler Murray's on a 1-year contract and JJ McCarthy is not there yet. And patience is never a bad thing with the quarterback position. Last year, I was a little surprised when they did it because I thought this is the boldest move that any team has pretty much ever made at the quarterback position. To walk away from a 14-game winner, 4,300 yards, 35 touchdowns, as great as Sam Darnold was in 2024, for somebody who's never played before is very risky and very bold. And it put McCarthy in a position where, especially with no other quarterback there, with no Daniel Jones, with no Aaron Rodgers, it put him in a position where it's all on you, dude. Everything, all the weight of this entire thing is on you. And then when he did struggle, it kind of fell apart in the middle of the season. He was not able to dig himself out of that hole in the middle of the year, and it just kept getting worse, and they just kept sinking farther. Whereas if you can have time to develop and be healthy and be active, not standing over there with a clipboard while your knee is recovering, but really be engaged on a weekly basis through practice, I think you can get a lot better. And people have used the Josh Allen example. I don't know that I would go with that because he was playing and he was healthy, but I would go with Malik Willis. When Malik Willis played for the Tennessee Titans, it was laughably bad. He had no idea what he was doing. And when he came back for Green Bay, the first time he was okay and he ran a lot and they threw screens and stuff. And then when he came back the second time, he was excellent. So I think there's a lot of proof to show you that quarterbacks, when they get time as backups, can improve. Geno is that. Baker Mayfield has been on the record talking about his time as a backup quarterback and how it helped him reset. Sam Darnold helped him reset. This does not have to be the apocalypse of somebody's career when they don't play for a year, especially when you're this young. So I'm not disagreeing with that at all. The BD97, if I was a betting man, I'd place the money on Wentz to win it if there was a competition. Well, both guys could get hurt, I suppose. I mean, Wentz came back to be a backup quarterback and a mentor to McCarthy, which I think is a good thing. But if JJ doesn't beat out Wentz, and that means he probably just hasn't mastered the offense the way they need him to do it. And that's because Carson Wentz is going to know it. Wentz will know it inside and out with no problem. He came in and executed the offense after he wasn't even here in training camp fairly well. So he's going to know it. You have to meet that standard now. There's no more you're young. And that's how it goes in the NFL. There's no more, hey, well, you're just figuring it out. You're just developing. Not when it comes to the offense. When it comes to throwing the football, yes, there is more of a show progress, keep getting better with that. But when it comes to going to the line of scrimmage and being able to get everyone lined up with every motion, everything else, you got to know it by now. And if he doesn't have that locked in from day one of training camp, he won't be the backup quarterback. Kyler Murray only doesn't start if he's not healthy. Gazinka had Ben Lieber pounding that plus 7,000. Yeah, that was earlier this offseason that Ben said he thought that maybe Wentz would be the starter. I mean, I think it was made pretty clear by Kevin O'Connell at the owners' meetings that's not, going to be the case. And I think Wentz coming back is a really big thing for them because when it comes to just the injuries that these other two quarterbacks have had, let's say that, Murray's banged up, McCarthy goes in, he gets hurt. Like, you got to be ready. And you never know what kind of circus can ensue with Vikings quarterbacks. So I like that. I also like that he's here for McCarthy. Wentz, he's been through it all, man. He's been at the top of the mountain. He's been at the bottom. He's been a backup on a championship caliber team in Kansas City. He's been a starter. Like, he's done it all. DOD, true competition. So you want to see a true competition. Kit also says definitely want to see a true competition. JJ making the leap is certainly the best, if less likely scenario. Kyler has potential, but will command 35 plus million if he wins. Let them both prove it. I think that from the Vikings perspective, and this is why a lot of people are saying it's a competition, is that philosophically it's ideal to just, hey, why would you not have a quarterback competition if neither one of these guys is proven? The thing is that one of them really kind of is, to much more of a level, not a championship ring. You wouldn't have him if he had a championship ring. He would still be an Arizona Cardinal. So he's flawed for sure, but is just on such a different level with his full seasons that he's played before than what JJ McCarthy showed last year. But there's no reason for the Vikings to lock it in early, to just say, all right, JJ, don't even bother showing up to practice. You're not QB1, whatever. I think competitive environment is actually the right approach to this. You want to feel like Kyler is being pushed. You want to feel like JJ McCarthy is trying to chase him down and is on his heels as he goes forward. Yes, you do want Kyler Murray to prove that he could be the starting quarterback of the Vikings. As far as the money goes, well, one, they manage their salary cap nicely to be able to handle it. And I think that says a little bit of something about trying to look forward for the Vikings and maybe project Kyler Murray as their guy. But the other thing is that the way that the cap works now, it's just not as daunting to have to pay Kyler Murray and then build the rest of your roster. And I also think that looking at the potential hires for GM, they're looking at it as building through the draft the next time anyway. Yes, it would be better for JJ McCarthy for about a year or two to be, but it ends up being a little bit less when you're unlikely to have to pay the full amount, right? So when you have a Daniel Jones, when you have a Sam Darnold contract, when you have a Baker Mayfield, these are teams that have won around expensive quarterbacks, but not that expensive. The middle class of the NFL for quarterbacks is here. Dak's getting 60, Darnold's getting 30 something. And also the way that these contracts are structured now, it's rarely what it looks like in terms of average annual value. So I'm not so terrified of that happening. But to your point, would it be better overall in the big picture if JJ McCarthy became the franchise quarterback that you expected him to be when you drafted him? Yes. Yes, it would. There's no doubt about that. And if it gets interesting, if we're going into joint practices saying, I wonder how they're going to distribute the reps, well, that'll be very different than what we expect, but probably a lot better for the franchise that they feel like they've got something there in JJ McCarthy. And if he were to win the competition, I don't know. I mean, I guess you probably trade Kyler Murray somewhere else and then you're getting draft capital for that. And who the heck knows, right? That's the Sam Bradford, Carson Wentz situation from Philadelphia with Sam Bradford ending up as a Viking. The one thing that we should always know with quarterbacks is that we never know. We just never know how it's going to play out. And it's surprised us so many times. So you shouldn't count out McCarthy and say that it's over. And the Vikings should present it as more of a true competition. But I still lean much more toward this is Kyler Murray's show. And there's a lot that points to him being the best version of himself here. Fetchwater says all in on Kyler Murray, but curious to see JJ's improvement. I mean, you can absolutely live in both of those worlds. Yep. You can absolutely live in both of those worlds, which is if you look at Kyler Murray's career, even recently, even his last 22 games, just watch those. Don't even look at the best season he had. Just look at those. It is not hard to see why Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson, why they could work with Kyler Murray and have him have a lot of success. You can also see the flaws, and there's no doubt about that. And there will be times where everyone is frustrated with Kyler Murray. There's going to be a turnover on a play where he's trying to do something special. There's going to be maybe a check down or getting rid of a ball quick where someone's breaking wide open, and that's going to frustrate people. But this dude just has a very, very high level of talent. And I was on Bucky Brooks' show the other day. He had me on his show. And he said, and remember, Bucky is a former scout, that he felt like just from a raw talent perspective, not even like stats or anything else like that, but just from a scout's raw talent perspective, he said that he thinks that Kyler Murray is more talented than Sam Darnold. Now, I think they're very different because Darnold's not really a runner. Is a playmaker out of structure, but Murray's running. And Darnold for his arm strength is accurate, but can be a little bit inaccurate. Murray takes less sacks than Sam Darnold did with the Vikings. But I think that kind of tells you where like the world that he lives in, the air that Kyler Murray breathes as an actual talent. So I think that's the right place to be for Vikings fans is, yeah, I mean, you could absolutely see this working, but then that doesn't mean you have to throw out JJ McCarthy because we don't have to live in the debate show universe. Like that's just not something that we like have to do, right? We don't have to just like, oh, well, you either love this guy and hate this guy or whatever. Like it's just, you don't have to do that. You really don't. Digital Plains Media, should the Vikings try to draft Brendan Sorsby in the supplemental draft? That's going to be a no for me, dog. Dude betting on his own team. No. I mean, and Brendan Sorsby, so I watched probably 2 games of him this year, and somebody that I know is a talk host in Cincinnati also, and I've been following him talking about this Sorsby thing. There's been some discussion about Sorsby as if, well, this guy is a first round draft pick and like you could get a steal by going through the supplemental draft. I just didn't really see that. I mean, that's been the discussion. And I know that nobody loves hyping up quarterbacks quite like the draft universe. It worked with, Ty Simpson went in the first round. I didn't think he would. I don't see one of those super prospects in Sorsby. I think if he was Cam Newton, then you might go, okay, well, look, yeah. We'll just clean up the gambling part. But I mean, gambling on your own team is if you do it in the NFL, I imagine there has to be, I don't know, I've never looked into the rules. You got to be done for life, right? Or something. I mean, Isaiah Rodgers had the whole thing with him where someone else was using his account. He got suspended for a year. But if this dude comes to the NFL and does this, then he's never going to play in the league at all. It's probably going to be a big distraction because it's a big story. You've already got a quarterback competition going on, or at least a new quarterback. I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze with Brendan Sorsby. And I'm not even fully convinced they're going to do the supplemental draft thing because it rarely happens. And he's suing, I think, to play in college football or something. I don't know. I'm just not in. Gazinkad, I like Aaron Rodgers in the NFL because it means there's still a player older than me. Yeah, I feel that, my friend. I definitely feel that. Chris Thomason, who covers Denver now, used to cover the Vikings, told me that one time because I said, man, getting up toward 4-0, starting to feel a little creaky. And he's like, you're not old until you're older than every player in the league. So I am not older than every player in the league, which means I am still fresh and youthful. SWAT, I could see Murray starting the first half of the season and doing well, then falling off, allowing McCarthy to come in and ball out the rest of the season. That would create a very difficult scenario for Kevin O'Connell because Sam Darnold had a dip for a couple weeks and then finished super well. If Kyler Murray starts out the season 6-2 and loses a couple of games, you're going to hear it. People will want JJ McCarthy, and especially if he plays poorly. And when he plays poorly, it can often go off the rails. It can be really rough with him historically, but is that really the right way to approach it? If someone has this background and you don't really know what McCarthy's going to bring, I think that they would have to be at the out of the playoffs level. Like think about where they were last year, 4-8. I think that's where they would have to be. That's how I see it playing out is Murray starts week 1. As long as he's healthy, he's the quarterback, unless it completely goes into a place we don't expect it to. If they are 2-4, 2-5, and it's just going horribly and you have to make a change. But this guy kept the Arizona Cardinals in 2024 right in the race. He won twice as many games as Jacoby Brissett did last year and should have won another one. If Marvin Harrison could catch a ball against San Francisco, they should have been 3-2. But which I know you could say for some JJ games as well. But like this, Murray has kept Arizona in seasons before where they didn't really deserve to be as an actual football team. So it's hard to see him not being good enough to keep the Vikings in the playoff race. I'll probably keep making this comparison throughout the summer. He's like Kirk in a lot of ways, Murray, and that's like a compliment and not, and also acknowledging the weaknesses of his game. Where when he's hot, it's crazy and he's incredible. And then when he goes cold, it doesn't make any sense to you. And the ups and downs drive you nuts. That's what he's been so far in his career. And I think if Kirk had been Arizona's quarterback in 2024, they probably win 8 games, just like he did with Atlanta. So it's evening that out. And KOC was able to even that out with Kirk. The same thing goes for the leadership, the personality, stuff like that, which O'Connell is as good of a communicator as exists in the NFL. So can he get more out of him from that perspective than was ever there before in Arizona? Rach, if JJ doesn't win the quarterback competition, I think there's a real chance he'll be traded. I believe a lot of this is a real quarterback competition smoke is the team trying to maintain his trade value. I think that is a reasonable viewpoint. And if they got to a place where, I don't know, it's like trading him away, it would kind of have to be bad, I think, in order to do that. Like just not a good situation in general, with unhappiness or, discomfort or whatever within the quarterback room. I'm not sure. Everything points to so far, JJ McCarthy has been a good teammate since he arrived in Minnesota. But, I think if you're in the, say, Anthony Richardson seat where it just looks like the team has moved on, maybe you go to them and say, it's better if you trade me. If he loses out the QB2 job, you might have a point. But I also think it's going to be in the back of KOC's mind of why would I trade my QB3 when I might need him? And I've needed him a couple of times before. It would have to be a pretty good offer. Now, if a team that's expecting to be good and win were to get their quarterback injured in training camp / preseason, and they came to you and said, just like when, the Vikings traded a first for Sam Bradford, which now seems kind of crazy. If you were super desperate and you come to the Vikings and go, we'll give you a second and a 2028 fourth when you host the draft for JJ McCarthy, and he's your QB3, then you have to think about doing it. So you might be onto something there, but I don't think it's too rational to be done with him when you don't see how he comes back. Like, to see if there's a freshman year, sophomore year type of jump from him in maturity, in his throwing, in his knowledge of the offense, you have to find that out first. But you're right, though. If you find out that you don't really like where it stands, then a trade becomes possible. So I'm not going to dismiss that possibility. Jeremiah, they dropped the ball not keeping Sam and having JJ have a full year of learning behind a vet where he can actually practice. I think this year would be a perfect year to do that. That's how I view it. I don't feel it's like what Rach was talking about, just from my viewpoint, not saying either one of us is right because we don't know what they're thinking behind the scenes. But my viewpoint is much more, I think they want to see just how it looks when he's had a healthy offseason, a totally healthy offseason, and he's been able to work on the things that they've told him to work on. And how do you come back? Are you more accurate in practice? Because that was the thing. We talked about how he had a good training camp. It wasn't Sam Bradford's training camp. It was okay. And that was about our expectation for where he was in his career. But there was a lot of inaccuracy throughout last summer. If that happens again, then you're probably talking about, a rough situation. But if he is improving in his accuracy and he has time to be behind the veteran, then he could put them in a position where they're still having him in consideration long-term and seeing where it goes long-term with JJ McCarthy, because you don't know what's going to happen with Kyler Murray. And the other thing is with Kyler Murray, man, that guy could win 10 games and play really well and then be like, yep, sign him with the highest bidder. Do not care about the Minnesota Vikings. It could happen. He might be that way. He might say, I'm just going to sign to the highest bidder. And then you're looking around going, now what? Right. So I think that's why you want to keep him in the mix and see where he's at through another year. By the way, the FanDuel question of the day, if you missed that earlier or you're just joining, is that the FanDuel has released odds on the Vikings quarterback competition, and Kyler Murray is minus 1,000 and JJ McCarthy is plus 600. So do you either A, feel like you're excited about Kyler Murray and you've kind of gone too far with that, you're all in on Murray, or do you really want a true competition for this summer? That's the FanDuel question of the day. Joker, the only quarterback competition benefit is for KO and the coaches to evaluate themselves. Do they actually know what they're looking at? Because there's a big gap in skill. Can they see that in camp? Well, I don't have any doubt that they're able to evaluate their quarterbacks and their execution during training camp. I think that the only concern with the Vikings coaches, with KOC, even to some extent Brian Flores, is that they really believe in themselves. And sometimes you can believe in yourself too much. I was having a conversation with someone in the league not that long ago, and we're just, sort of banding some stuff about. And I said, you always need to make sure that you never believe it's you. And I think that the Vikings thought with Sam Darnold that it was them. And it was Sam, as he proved with the Seattle Seahawks. And it was a perfect situation, and things fell their way, and they had to have good breaks to win the Super Bowl, as everyone does. But it's Sam Darnold. He's a franchise quarterback. He is a phenomenal NFL quarterback. And he continued where he left off with Minnesota, which is not perfect. And he'll have his bad days, but man, I don't know who doesn't these days. Mahomes has bad days. Allen has bad days. But when it was Darnold, he was seeing ghosts and he was a loser. When these other guys who are top draft picks and everything else, it's, well, he'll bounce back next week. And that's track record. But, I think the Vikings believed our environment, our coaching, our receivers, that's what made Sam Darnold what he was. And it turned out that not everyone can just be dropped into that situation, especially when they're inexperienced. So with Kyler Murray, I don't know that they're taking that approach. Like, I think that there's motivation from the coaching staff to have success with Murray, to wash out the bad taste of letting go the Super Bowl winning quarterback. But there also needs to be, some humility with that as they make a future decision too, of like, how much can you really boost a quarterback, or, are they all kind of versions of what they are? And it depends on the situation, but also where they are in their career as well, which, Darnold was ready to take that next big step. So managing, because of course a head coach is going to believe in themselves. Of course, Brian Flores is going to believe in his evaluations. That's how these guys get there. They are psychotically competitive and confident and all that stuff. But you also need to draw a line with that of, hey, it's the players and not the plays, which is what, Pat Shurmur would always say. So it's an interesting dynamic there of how they manage that. And, how do they approach Kyler and JJ McCarthy from that perspective? But yeah, they're going to see that Kyler is more accurate. There's no doubt that Kyler is going to be more accurate. You couldn't suddenly come in as JJ McCarthy and fix it all. It's about how much progress, I think. Jeremiah, I do agree on seeing if he's made improvement from last year, but fine with Kyler starting this year until things start to fall off with him or he gets hurt, which could or might not happen. Parker, do you see the Twitter account saying that Jefferson was bad last year for JJ, LMAO? Well, Jefferson and his drop rate, it's funny because it turned out to be exactly the same as it's always been. But usually the quarterback got the ball within the general vicinity of him, which didn't always happen. And so some of the drops were really memorable and notable in games, which does matter. And there were times last year where Jefferson was clearly very frustrated and didn't have, it seemed, the same level of intensity or concentration or whatever it was that we have seen from him. But there was so many throws that just went flying right over his head. It's kind of like I was saying earlier. What people do in May, and this, I'll give you a good example of this. Every single year that I covered Kirk Cousins, there was someone in the media, whether it was here or elsewhere, who would predict that Kirk Cousins would win the MVP. And Kirk is good, and we all know that. And he, I think, got the short end of the stick in some ways because the Vikings didn't draft well enough to sustain around him. And I also think that he caused that because of the contracts that he signed and the structure and his general shortcomings. The games that were no-shows, the times he stood in the pocket for too long, the strip sacks, the interceptions, all that stuff. A flawed but very, very good quarterback for sure, Kirk Cousins. But in May, he would be Peyton Manning to some people. They would clip together a bunch of Kirk's best throws. And if you clip together Kirk's best throws, oh my gosh. Because he's accurate and he downfield was very good at dropping it in the bucket and all that stuff. Like he was out there throwing 30 touchdowns a year with 100 quarterback rating. Like there's a lot to like, right? But that wasn't the whole story with Kirk Cousins. And it's the same way with stuff like that. In May, people can be whatever you want them to be. JJ McCarthy, just completely rewrite what happened last year because it's too far separated for people to remember, and you can blame whoever the heck you want to blame and everything else. Rach says Vikings fans turning on Jefferson before they turn on McCarthy. But it's not really. It's, I'm sure it's a couple people who online are looking for a way to get people riled up, get some attention, whatever. It clearly was not Justin Jefferson, but there were moments last year where Jefferson was not as good as we would have expected him to be and didn't catch balls that we would have expected him to catch. And so he does need, and he's acknowledged that himself, like he does need a better season. But was it Justin Jefferson's fault? Absolutely not. The timing was brutal. The accuracy was way off. That's not on Jefferson in any way. And I think there's, the thing is that you can be, the problem with social media is that we think that everyone is insane because online being insane gets you a lot of attention. So saying stuff like that gets you attention. If I wrote a tweet and said, you know what, I think that Jefferson definitely was partly responsible for what happened, but also the inaccuracy and inexperience of the quarterback caused his downturn, that gets 2 likes. If I say it was all Jefferson's fault, that gets so much more, so many responses and online engagement. No one cares if it's positive or negative or if it's 10,000 people calling you a dope. So we get convinced because the people who get the most attention are often saying the stupidest stuff. That TV can be like that too. So we often get convinced that everyone's insane, but not really. I think that 95% of Vikings fans know what happened last year. I also think that 75% of Vikings fans don't want JJ McCarthy gone. They don't want the team to give up on him. They want them to see what happens this summer, see where he's at. Like more people are rational than you think about sports. It just doesn't seem that way because we look at our phones too much. Joker, I love that Rodgers is coming back, having a rival to hate watch that consistently gets clobbered in the playoffs. Really puts a smile on my face. Most overrated quarterback of all time. So you had me until the end there. I don't think he's the most overrated quarterback of all time. I think that at his peak of his career, he is as great as any quarterback that's ever played. His MVP seasons are mind-blowing. He is unreal, like in terms of his arm talent, his accuracy, very close to having multiple Super Bowl wins if this goes right or that goes right. Instead, meltdowns by things around him, an onside kick or a punt block or whatever have kind of kept him from getting there. But I think that there are, to every single quarterback, there are things that get them at times. And with Aaron Rodgers, his propensity to kind of just like throw the ball away or get frustrated or, whatever, I think that has held him back a little at times. Manning got super nervous in the playoffs when he went into those big games early in his career. You could see it all over his face. Brady, if you got in his face with pressure, at times would fall apart. There's a early Brady career game against Baltimore where he's just completely no-shows because of how much pressure they put on him. I mean, no one is perfect. No quarterback has ever been perfect. Elway lost a bunch of Super Bowls before he finally broke through and won. Steve Young was a backup forever, right? Like before getting in and playing some of the best football of all time. Every quarterback has some flaws, but there's an air of like these guys are the all-time of the all-time, and Favre is there, and I think Rodgers is very close. If you're doing the all-time tiers list, and it's like Johnny Unitas, right, and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, it's pretty hard not to put Aaron Rodgers right there on that list, if not maybe one section down, but he's pretty darn close. So I don't know now who is the most overrated quarterback of all time is an interesting question. I mean, it's probably Joe Namath, honestly. Like production versus like the legend of Joe Namath doesn't really match up, even for the era. But he's also super fun to watch when he's at his best. The knees, that's not really his fault. But if you just went overrated versus who people think are the best quarterbacks and then look at his actual performance, I mean, in the Super Bowl that they won, the credit deserved mostly to Matt Snell, actually. In that Super Bowl, the running back for the New York Jets. But, right, so the legend, I think, if it's not him, I don't know. I'd be curious what you guys think, the most overrated quarterback of all time. Matt Vrick, I would rather it played out how it did than if Rodgers had played here, knowing how far away that McCarthy is and that we got Coller for super cheap. I think I agree with you. Yep. I think I agree with you on that it is ultimately better the way that it played out rather than us today because of the timeline. They would have, if they went 9-8 or 10-7, they probably go 10-7. I mean, the quarterback play was so brutal. I mean, you get one more win in there somewhere. But if they went 10-7 and got stomped in the first round, and then we were talking about, well, now it's JJ's time, he would have been a lot better prepared for it. I will say that. But still, he never would have played before. And we would still be talking about going through some of the same learning curve, even if he was much better prepared for it. And this is really the last year of this roster together with the age of some of these players. So Yeah, I think it did play out better ultimately. Bill says 1.3 million to 60 million if he has a good year. Then what? He's not getting paid 60 million if he has a good year. JJ will develop and has big potential at 23. Go with the kid. I don't see how you can do that. Like go with the kid doesn't feel like it's any sort of option at all. But, when it comes to, the 60 million, that's not happening. If Kyler Murray goes 11-6 with the Vikings and they win a playoff game, he's not getting $60 million. It's not happening. Sam Darnold won 14 games with the Vikings and he got 30 something. Was it 30? I mean, it was announced as a 3-year, $110 million contract, but it really wasn't. So it was closer to like $33 million a year. That's not 60. And they would do it in a way. Look at Daniel Jones's contract that he just got. It was $44 million per year, but I think his cap hit this year is 17. Like it's just not working that way these days. Now, when it comes to developing, we don't know if he will develop, and we really don't know if he has big potential. And 23, weirdly enough, you're starting to get toward like, yeah, I mean, it's time you need to show something. We don't know if he will or not. But in terms of like your confidence if he will develop, we have no idea. We have no idea how that's going to turn out. So just saying, oh yeah, go with him. Like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that to Aaron Jones, to TJ Hawkinson, to Justin Jefferson, to KOC's career, to just say, yeah, roll the dice. Yeah, was he one of the bottom 5 quarterbacks in the league last year? Sure, but why not? Let's just give it a try because we don't want to pay Kyler next year, even though the Super Bowl team paid a quarterback. And who was the NFC runner-up? The Los Angeles Rams, who paid a quarterback? I mean, it is so much more possible. Wait, who won the Super Bowl in 2024? A team that, say it with me, paid a quarterback in Jalen Hurts? I mean, it's not... Wait, who won this Super Bowl before? Was it Kansas City who paid a quarterback? It's changed. Stuff changes. And yes, you have to be able to build around it with some more constrictions, but it is not like what it used to be. And the reason why Kirk was so constricting is because it was always short term and it was always fully guaranteed. That was the problem. Joker says through these twilight years have maybe dropped his overratedness a bit. You mean Rodgers? There are recently some people brave enough to question his Justin Herbert-like unblameable status. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think that you, like any Vikings fan has any right to hate Aaron Rodgers as much as you want to hate him. The peaks of Aaron Rodgers' career are as good as anybody who's ever played. So if you're saying that peak Aaron Rodgers was as good as anyone, and the fact that he won an MVP in the middle of his career, won it later in his career, pretty hard to knock the guy too much. But I do think that what's happened toward the end of his career, especially the Jet stuff, the way he was out there talking and everything else, I think it hurt his just his general status for sure. And the way that he managed some of the stuff with the end of Green Bay and everything. But time tends to heal that wound, as it did with, Brett Favre, who got himself in the news for other reasons later on. But in terms of with Favre and Green Bay and what a circus he put them through at the end of his career in Green Bay, it all smooths out over his career. I mean, when you add up Aaron Rodgers versus any of the greats, it's pretty close. But yeah, I mean, right. Some of those playoff games, he wasn't good enough. And he did make mistakes that caused them to lose. And he doesn't have, a million Super Bowls like Tom Brady. He doesn't have multiple Super Bowls like Peyton Manning. I don't think you can quite put them in their air, who are the best of the best. But I also think that I think society places Aaron Rodgers pretty well. He is one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, clearly, but he's not the greatest. Moral Jones over Young. Absolutely Daniel Jones over Bryce Young. 100%. Daniel Jones, you're funny, Joker. QB rankings and power rankings is the right YouTube channel. That's what I'm all about it now. I think it's fun. I'm having some fun with ranking stuff and I'm trying to bring it to the show. It's not the only thing we bring to the show. There's going to be OTA reporting too, but I'm live streaming more than I ever have before. So I feel like this is a good way to engage the conversation. Daniel Jones was a lot better than Bryce Young last year. Bryce Young needs to average 7 yards a pass attempt before I start saying that he's a quarterback I'd be concerned about. 6.3 yards per attempt last year. I mean, they squeaked into the playoffs. The Vikings had a better record than them, and they end up in the postseason because the NFC South is a joke. I think the Panthers are in a really good place with their roster, but they're going to be in a hard spot if Bryce Young does this again. If they win 9 games and get into the playoffs and they have a good defense and a well-stocked group of weapons and a good line, which I think they do have a good offensive line, and Dave Canales, I think, does a good job as their coach. So if they get there and they lose in the playoffs because Bryce Young's just not that good, like, what do you do? Because he kind of looks like a backup quarterback to me with his talent, that he could get you through and win games and go 500, but I don't know that he's ever shown he could play at a high level where, at very least, Daniel Jones, we've seen it a couple times in stretches, and Jones has a bigger arm. He's a bigger guy. Yeah, I'd have him above, but I had him in the same ballpark. It's not like I had him way different. Rodgers was a bottom 10 quarterback in the league last year by a lot of different metrics. I don't think the season is demonstrably different with him than it would be with McCarthy. What game? Ooh, that's a good one. So what game did they win? Chicago and maybe Baltimore. Baltimore was a little tricky, but man, he kind of just threw that one away. Chicago at home is the game that they win if they even get anything. But sure, you're right though, is they might have ended up getting some good quarterback play in games that they won, and had it not be a heck of a lot different, maybe Philadelphia, they win that game. That was, Carson Wentz, but he struggled to get the ball in the end zone. You might be right though. Like if they had gone 9-8 with Aaron Rodgers and missed the playoffs, it would have felt like, what a freaking waste. We would have torn them apart if they had done that and missed the playoffs for sure, and said this was a massive waste. So you're right. It's better that they didn't go with Aaron Rodgers long term. SWAT says, I'd rather have Kyler Murray than Rodgers based on our scheme. If we threw more short passes, I'd take Rodgers, but most of our plays take forever to develop, which is why you need a mobile quarterback. And I think that they're going to try to adjust that. I really do. And maybe, this is the test, right? So I think that Kevin O'Connell, being on the younger side as a head coach, the really younger side as a head coach, has room to learn and make adjustments and look in the mirror truly. And we've seen some of that with the adaptations to the coaching staff and the run game, maybe the drafting of Claiborne, trying to get more offensive line depth, like some of the things that have gotten him in the past, you could see an awareness of it, right? Maybe not being physically imposing enough at the defensive tackle position. You could see awareness there of some things. And getting Juwan Jennings, I think, also shows an awareness of, you need some physical toughness at that receiver position. You need some possession at that receiver position. You can't just have 3 deep guys, even though it's a catchy name and it's awesome. And I saw those guys were fishing the other day. I don't know if it's a competition or what, or just fishing. Moss, Carter, and Jake Reed. Jake Reed tweeted that out. But this is not 1998. The quick passing game is really important in the NFL today, and it feels like they've not had an answer when they've needed that in certain games. And now, they need it, and I think they got it from Juwan Jennings. So, but overall, yes. A mobile quarterback is worth its weight in gold. When you look at Kyler Murray, so this is the thing about Murray, right? You look at his passing stats and you go, like, okay, that's all right for his career. But when you look at the expected points added by his running, he is one of the top 5 quarterbacks since he came into the league. And the other guys are Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. He's right there with them for how much value he's added to his team as a running quarterback. That's a big deal versus someone who, in Rodgers' case, can't run at all, can't move at all. But it's not really Murray versus Rodgers. It's kind of like, if they had gone Rodgers, you would have been, here's what it is. It's year 3 of JJ McCarthy and he's never played yet, or Kyler Murray. That's kind of the comparison, because if Rodgers had played for the Vikings, you wouldn't have seen JJ McCarthy last year. Paul's going A all day with the FanDuel question of the day, all in on Kyler Murray. So it's kind of moved past the idea of a competition. Tyler says, is it just me, or does the longer it goes, it feels like it's Rob's job for the general manager position? But it's not. I mean, the thing about this GM search is how long was it supposed to go? I have no idea because no GMs ever get hired in May. Is this how long May GM, hires go? I honestly have no idea. I know how long they go when it's January. It's usually a couple of weeks and then bang, you got yourself a GM, but that's not generally how it goes in May because we have no idea. There is a holiday coming up. There is another owners meetings. Usually, I know the Star Tribune sent Emily Leiker. Usually I don't go to this one, but there's, because the coaches aren't there. So, we usually don't go, or at least I don't think so. Anyway, the point is that there's an owners meetings. There's a Memorial Day. I don't know if they're flying people in until another week or two. So it may be the reason why it's kind of taken a little bit longer to do all these interviews and find a general manager, but it might be, they might interview these guys and decide, you know what, we feel like we're good. I will continue to say that I think the best possible structure is Rob in charge at the very top and the GM and the head coach, they answer to him and he answers to ownership. And that's the structure. That's my favorite idea for this, but it might be a little hard to get certain GMs to agree to that. If their guy, and that might be the reason Chad Alexander's not going for it. I don't know. That's fully speculation. That is not a report. But just maybe, right? If that's what they want to do, then getting the structure worked out with the candidates is kind of a big deal. But I think it also might just be the way the schedule plays out. That's why it's also taking a while. Moral, any concerns about the GM and head coach being on different schedules? Yes. Yep. That's one of the reasons I like the idea of having Rob be at the top because Rob is on no schedule. Rob is a Viking for life and he has the trust of the Wilfs. And I think he really showed this summer, spring, winter, why he deserved it, to have that trust, why he does, because he managed a minefield of an offseason, a really, really bad salary cap situation with needs to be addressed on the team, and played the wide receiver spot really well to end up with Juwan Jennings. I think operated the draft in a way that got the coaches what they needed and wanted, which is the right way to approach it for this draft. And then you want maybe in the future to have a general manager be the one that's leading the way. But Rob showed why the Wilfs have had so much trust in him. And if he's at the top, then it isn't. It's like he's the guy. And then the GM, they're on different schedules overall, but that's mitigated as opposed to one guy maybe wanting one thing longer term, another shorter term. It's like, no, we're doing it Rob's way, which is always going to be an eye on longer term as we learned this year. So that's why I like that. But if it's just the GM and Rob is kicked back to his old position and the GM has the final say and everything else, then yes, that is it concerning or is it just interesting? Concerning is probably it, but I am leaning toward when you have a good coach, you should let that person continue to get better and better because there have been a lot of coaches who've been around for a while and it doesn't always happen right when they get there. And then eventually it does. So that's kind of how I see KOC. But if you hire a GM who's completely in command, they could evaluate KOC this year and they go 8-9 and then it's out and you're having a coaching search. So it does work that way sometimes. I'm very interested in it. It's a great question. I just don't know how it's going to play out. Jay, I think Murray will have over 3,500 yards passing, 35 touchdown passes, 10 picks. I think he will play in 15 out of the 17 games. 35 touchdown passes is very high. I mean, I don't know how many guys had 35 all of last year, which I know it should be in your head. Hey, I remember when Darnold had, I know. But that doesn't happen a ton. I mean, what's his career high? Is it maybe 27? So that would be a lot. He'll run for a couple touchdowns probably, but if you said total touchdowns, if he plays 15 games is pushing 30 and that he'll play in most of the games, I mean, it's one of the best cases scenario situations that you could come up with. And if he had the season you're talking about, then you're signing him to a $45 million contract for sure. Joker, in a vacuum, does having the best asset management guy above the scouting guy in the hierarchy make sense? Or is it Vikings specific reference to the idea of Rob as a president. Yeah, I mean, in other places, I don't know like what every background is. In Atlanta's case, it's Matt Ryan, so it's a former player. It's not asset management or scouting necessarily. Personally, yes. I think, of course, scouting and the execution of the draft and finding players that you could develop and all that other stuff, it's super valuable. And it's not a huge shock that the teams that are good at it have some of the better long-term evaluators. And John Schneider is coming to mind. He's had some bad drafts, but in general, John Schneider has been really good at evaluating what his team needs and how to build a winner and stuff like that. But this is a game now where you don't have, like back in the day, you might have had a team that had this really bare bones, small scouting staff, and you might have had another team that had a huge scouting staff. You might have had people who were great at the Raiders way back in the day under Al Davis. They were great at beating the bushes and finding players that nobody else had heard of and stuff like that and drafting them and making them stars. Does not happen in today's world. You have people making big boards with 250 players. Like, we know who the players are. We're rarely surprised even on day 3 by the draft. Every team, not just because it's public, but also because they've made a ton of money and they've built up these scouting staffs and they've invested in the data and analytics. I saw the Ravens are hiring another data person. Lots of teams have built up data staff. These are huge front offices. These are machines now when it comes to player evaluation. So you're not saying, wow, our scout went to, this random game in Kansas and he found this kid and he's going to be like, that just doesn't happen. So I think what it comes down to is fit is a huge deal. Fit with your culture, fit with your scheme, all that sort of stuff. Identifying the right fit players is really big. And I think asset management is where things are won and lost. If you can have more draft picks, you get more shots. If you can have more salary cap space, you can have more flexibility in free agency to solve problems, and you don't have to just leave it to undrafted free agents, for example. That's the cheat code of the NFL. Not that I don't think some teams are better at evaluation than others. I do. It still exists, but it's not this wide gap that it used to be because everybody has kind of the same information. Who manages their assets better and who gets good quarterback play? Purple Kool-Aid, not only do you have KOC, but also Flores with a large say on their side of the ball puts the new GM in a tough spot. That is 100% true. And if you are in the interviews, you have to understand that this is a head coach and a general manager that have had a lot of power here. And how are you going to manage that and work with them to get where you need to go? And that's where Rob did a really good job. Rob has more credibility with the Wilfs than anybody else in that building. And you saw it, I think, this year, because they could have done stupid stuff with contracts. They could have made overreactionary signings, and they didn't. And I'm praising him for that because, as I said, asset management is king. And if you just put it all to win now, that's great. And last summer was really fun. Look at all these new toys that the Vikings got. And it should have mattered more than it did. But that's the risk of doing it, is when Kwesi said you never go full Rams, then he did. And it's okay, well, you didn't get Matthew Stafford though. That's the problem. That's the difference when you were spending all that money to get Hargrave and Allen and keep everybody together. So I think having an asset management person is the best thing you can have. But to your question or point, the fact that you're coming into a situation with two guys that have established themselves within that front office, it's a very unique dynamic where you kind of need to fit right in with them. You need to see things the way they see things. You need to understand the way they think. Can the new person do that will determine their success or failure. And that's why I think a lot of the people that they've looked at, Ray Agnew from the Lions, who I've heard very good reviews on, or Dave Ziegler from the Raiders, these guys have backgrounds in the same places as O'Connell and Flores, and I don't think that that's just by accident. Steven, who's the GM that will be making the picks in 2028? So it's a really good question. It's a really good question, Steven. I don't know. I don't have a favorite. they're also similar. I think Nolan Teasley from Seattle is probably the one that most people think will be at the front of the line. His team won the Super Bowl. He's been on the radar as a candidate for quite some time to become a general manager, kind of rising star category. But that's the question. Like, Ray Agnew is an older guy who played in the NFL, but was with the Rams, was with the rebuild of the Detroit Lions and the rebuild of the Rams, two teams that became highly competitive. It's kind of what you're going to have to do after that. So there's very different ends of the spectrum, but I guess Teasley would probably be my favorite for it, but who knows? Because they all have such similar backgrounds, and they did go back to the well and have more candidates come in after that first run. So I don't know if they just wanted to see what else is out there or didn't love what they heard, or, I don't know. Skull Shadow Wilfs want another player management collaboration. Hasn't worked with the triangle of authority or whatever. Kwesi, KOC, Flores, Grigson, Miller was. Need a Howie Roseman type. So that's the thing, Skull Shadow, is I just don't see it being that way, at least for right now, because there's some pretty clear buy-in by the Wilfs to Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. That buy-in has come in the form of many dollars that they have invested in both of those guys. I mean, KOC with the long-term extension, Flores becoming the highest paid defensive coordinator in the league. They believe in those guys. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what they want. I think they want their leadership to collaborate. And I think that you need a figure over the top of all that collaboration to make sure that it operates the right way, and to play, well, referee a little bit, but also liaison to the ownership. I think that's important. But I'm not in total disagreement with you that when you have a Howie Roseman type and that person is the dude in the front office and they call the shots, it was a little bit like that with Rick. I mean, he worked with Zimmer very closely, but Rick was the one that at the end of the day called the shots. And, it worked for a while until they ran into salary cap issues and missed draft picks, and then all of a sudden it didn't. But I think it can work if the coaches and the GM are on the same page. But when I did a story with Doug Whaley a few weeks ago, he said, you got to know who the guy is. You have to know who everyone should in the building, in the media, who is the one that's calling the shots on the roster. SWAT. You're talking about the draft. I was like, when we bounce around, sometimes I get confused. Would like the draft outside near the Viking ship. That would make sense. Maybe the fairgrounds. Yeah, I could see that. Jay says, lucky to have Murray this year. I think he'll be working hard to prove everyone wrong. 12-5 is my thought on the season record. Is the Armory building too small? I don't know. I have never been inside the Armory. They have concerts there. Maybe I should go sometime, but I don't know in terms of its size. The fairgrounds does make sense. Justin, did we just butterfly effect ourselves into our first Super Bowl winning season? Speaking of Aaron Rodgers not signing with the Vikings for 2025. Maybe. Yeah, maybe, Justin. Yeah, 15-2. Yeah, sure. Right? Could be. If Kyler Murray takes the Vikings to the Super Bowl, I don't know, Sam Darnold won it last year. If he does that, then it will be traced back to them not signing Aaron Rodgers. How funny. Purple Kool-Aid, can we be the city who finally breaks the idiotic tradition of booing the commissioner? I think that booing the commissioner is generally fun. And I also think that Roger Goodell at one time was a little on the annoying side. Like when he was doing the whole, I'm the tough guy, I'm going to suspend everybody who got pulled over with an ounce of weed or whatever. Like that was kind of over the top when Roger first took over. This is the greatest commissioner in pro sports history. I don't even know if it's close. Like the elevation of the National Football League to the point where it is now, just running laps around every other league. And people, fans and so forth have pushed back against, you're taking games overseas and everything else. The expansion worldwide of the National Football League is insane under Roger Goodell. And the functionality of the league. I mean, it's not a circus. The teams are on the same page largely. There's not a lot of drama within the NFL, not with the players and the coaches and inside buildings, but as in ownership. How many teams have been forced to move? Right now, there have been, you had St. Louis and that whole thing and whatever else, but it has not been chaos within the National Football League. And I mean, you could say the referees, but I mean, referees are a discussion in every single sport all the time. So there's that. I mean, there are blemishes for sure, but the expansion of the league, look at where the salary cap was even 10, 15 years ago and how much this league has exploded in its popularity. Raj doesn't deserve boo. And in fact, that's actually the funny thing is like, what psycho would even think to have the draft outdoors in different cities, especially cold weather cities? And yet there you are with how many over 1,000 people showing up. Like you're there showing up because Raj had this idea. Can't boo Raj. Doesn't make sense. Also, Minnesota nice, Purple Purgatory. My heart says full on competition. However, Kyler starts week 1. Yeah, somebody brought this up. It's like, just because it is a competition doesn't mean it's like an even competition. Just because it's a competition doesn't mean they both start at 50-50 and then the percentages move either way. It might start at 90-10, but it's still a competition. So yeah. Joker, more or less people than the state fair. I would say probably less. Those numbers are always ridiculous. Gold Skull, did I meet any listeners at joint practice? Every once in a while, someone will send me a note when I am at training camp. And I'll say hello. It does happen. We stand in a different spot though, than the fans. We have our little perch. So we can be on the sideline, or there's a little perch kind of thing that's between some of the stands. So we kind of go in there and we huddle underneath it because it's got a little shade. So that may be why you didn't see any of us because we were there. But sometimes, I'm around. The BD97, are we sure the Ravens faxed the paperwork to the league office for joint practices? That's funny, right? Yeah, that's funny. Unlike the Max Crosby trade. Purple Kool-Aid, we didn't have an offensive line between KOC and our O-line. They got Wentz permanently disabled. Well, he looked fine when I saw him the other day. We were there for something, and Wentz was around. I don't think he's permanently disabled. He just had shoulder surgery. But that was a memory to forget, say, with what happened that night against the Los Angeles Chargers. Yes. But you're right. The offensive line last year, health was a big factor for sure. Steven would like to have the new GM name before June 1st. Well, right. I mean, because if you get to June 1st, that's when you get a little more cap space and maybe an opportunity. There's still a good number of free agents who are out there that could help you potentially. Maybe you add 1 or 2 more players, but I think you're probably at the point where you don't want. Juwan Jennings was easy. And I'm sure that when that's one you might have to be going to ownership and talking about, like, should we sign this guy and so forth, even though there's no GM, but it's such a good deal. Yeah, sign him. Like, that's a backup offensive lineman price that you got Juwan Jennings for. But I think anyone else, you like to have your GM there. You don't want, and you want him to get a full evaluation. Start with mini camp, really take in what you have, meet everybody. I agree with you. Purple Kool-Aid couldn't get the Jim Kleinsasser comp. Are we talking about Max Bredesen? I like it if it's Max Bredesen, yeah. Purple Kool-Aid, with the timing, you could see him throwing behind receivers constantly because he was waiting. So Mike Renner put it like really well, is he said that he would not see it quick enough or pull the trigger quick enough and then try to make up for it with velocity. So, I'm late. I have to throw it as hard as I can. And that's a perfect way to describe it, because that's exactly what happened a lot. So if you could get that timing down, then a lot of things will improve. Steven, JJ may be a viable starting quarterback in the NFL, but the $1 million question is, will it be for the Vikings or another team? Darnold, Mayfield, Geno did it with another team. And so did Ryan Tannehill, who I think is actually the best comp for JJ McCarthy, considering his issues early, playing early. Tannehill had athleticism, but he wasn't running for 800 yards, right? But you're right. A lot of these do happen in a different city. My thing is just, you don't know what's going to happen. So if Murray comes in and by week 3, he ends up getting hurt and you go to McCarthy, like, who knows? He could take the reins and then off you go, right? So we have no idea how that's going to play out. But historically speaking, and this is the thing to keep in mind, all the data and everything else from the recent history of the NFL is if you're not drafted in the top 5, they don't give you a lot of time. They don't give you a lot of starts in the NFL to show something. Teams move on pretty quick if you're not drafted high, because if you're drafted high, those teams have forever. You can wait forever to find out if Cam Ward is good. You can wait this year. You can wait next year. That team sucks. But when you are not in a rebuilding type of mode, you need to win. And that puts a lot more pressure on that quarterback, which is ironic because those are usually the quarterbacks that need more development that are not picked in the top 5. Just love losing. That's quite a name. Wentz is the break glass QB3. Just give JJ one more chance, but a QB2. Great show. Thank you. I think that in a perfect world, that's exactly the situation that they're looking for. McCarthy proves that he belongs as QB2. He's mobile like Kyler Murray. You don't have to change the offense a ton. When Murray comes out, you're good to go. And you don't feel bad about where McCarthy is, even if you're unsure about how good he can be. But if Carson Wentz is the backup for week 1, oh man, that means it went bad. That means training camp just was a nightmare. And that's where the odds of McCarthy making it anywhere go down quite a bit if that ends up being the case, because that means he didn't master the offense. And that's what KOC is going to be most focused on. Rach, the world where McCarthy becomes a bona fide franchise quarterback the way someone like Drake May has no longer exists. The most we can hope is that he salvages things, but will never be elite. That's probably fair based on history. And every bit of history has its own circumstances, so you never know. But what you're saying is normally if a team decides to bail on a quarterback, the chances that it works out anywhere are pretty darn low. The chances that they reach an actual high are pretty darn low. And that's even for guys drafted in the top 5. So, even like Sam Darnold reached the high of being at least in the top 10 with the Vikings and was probably a top 12 quarterback last year and wins the Super Bowl. That is such a crazy outlier. Even Baker Mayfield reinvigorating himself. He was really good to start his career, by the way. Baker was. So that's not really a comp for this. Darnold, played poorly. I mean, Josh Allen didn't throw the ball well, but was a prolific runner. And then it kind of came along. It's really hard to find someone who played like this and then reached the peak of someone like what Drake May did last year. I do agree with that. Becoming a reasonably good quarterback is very much on the table, but becoming that, the physical tools were never really there for that. If it was going to be McCarthy becoming great, it was going to be like a Brock Purdy type of situation where he becomes great in part with the group that he has around him in the coaching. I think it's a fair point. Thanks for the chat engagement, dude. Thank you guys. This is what makes the live streaming possible. Otherwise, I'd just be, what would I be ranking by now if you guys didn't have interesting things to say? Maybe we need an NFL fullbacks ranking, but there's not that many left. I don't know kickers, punters. I'd be spending a lot of time on the punting competition. You guys' thoughts is what drives the show, man. So I appreciate you showing up and doing it. Purple Kool-Aid. I think if you were to trade JJ, it would have to be because someone else lost their starter and was willing to overpay. Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. Or it just got ugly. I mean, it's just hard to see with JJ as a person that it would get ugly. But I mean, with Anthony Richardson, he might demand a trade. And if they put it out there and got a really good offer, or as you said, there's some team that's really low on their situation. I mean, I don't know, like Jacoby Brissett is pulling a holdout. Have you guys seen that? How funny is that? Dude, you went 1-11 last year. Stop. Come on, just play out your contract, man. But like Arizona is a good example. Let's say that they are just vomiting in their mouth watching Carson Beck and Gardner Minshew and Jacoby Brissett battle it out. And they get to the end of camp and they're like, our team's not even that bad. We need something. We need some glimmer of hope. And it's not going well for McCarthy and Vikings camp. Second round, third round pick. I mean, maybe you do it at that point. Jay, what team in the NFC North would be the biggest competition to win the North? Detroit is the favorite to win the NFC North on FanDuel right now. And I feel like they deserve to be on paper. I think they have the strongest roster on paper until their entire defense and offensive line gets hurt again, as it seems to with the Lions every year. But, they're deserving of that. But I think when I did my power rank last time, I had Green Bay by a whisker because I feel a little more confident in projecting what Green Bay can be. Like, did Detroit just miss their window or could they still be really good? So, I mean, look, the FanDuel odds are the FanDuel knows all, and them going with Detroit is extremely reasonable. But I think Green Bay is the most stable of the group. So I don't know, all the teams, man. You can make a case for all four teams. Friends of Taz, I do not agree with your take that the most overrated quarterback by Vikings fans is Teddy. Don't agree with that. Teddy was on a really good trajectory. Yeah, so I see that pop up every once in a while, and I just don't understand it. He played in an environment where Mike Zimmer wanted to run the ball and play defense and game manage, and he came through when they needed him to a lot. Was very good on third downs. Made his share of plays with also an offense that was kind of antiquated. I don't think that anyone thought that this is where, when it comes to overrated, I don't think anyone thought Teddy Bridgewater was Aaron Rodgers. I think they liked Teddy Bridgewater a lot. So you might be mistaking ranking Teddy with liking Teddy, that they won a lot of games with him and they really turned around the franchise. I mean, you got to remember the context. They were in a dark place when Mike Zimmer came in. And they drafted a very likable quarterback who, hey, if he's the quarterback in 2017 and he gets a chance to rewrite history there instead of injuring his knee, then it might have been very different. I also thought he was making a ton of progress in 2016. So, yeah, I think that being like disappointed at what happened and really liking him and thinking that you could have won with them are all very rational thoughts, because Sam Bradford won a fair number of games in 16 despite everything that happened. And then Case Keenum, who's not as good as Teddy Bridgewater, or wasn't at the time, he ends up winning 13 games. So I don't know. I don't see that. I think fans liking Teddy is not fans thinking that he was Peyton Manning. Joker, Joe Namath is the argument for the most overrated quarterback of all time. Counter is that Namath took the pressure, all the pressure on himself, where Rodgers put the pressure on his teammates. Yeah, I mean, I think from a like teammate perspective and certainly cool guy perspective, Joe Namath was a lot better than Aaron Rodgers. But multiple MVPs, Super Bowl, the numbers he put up, it's just undeniable. I mean, he was for a period of time in his career unstoppable, and then he had some regression, and then it became unstoppable again. I have a tough time arguing that he's anything but one of the greatest of all time. In fact, I've always thought that made it way better when he was playing against the Vikings. Like, you're going against the best here. So when you'd get him, it was when Zimmer would have a good day against Rodgers, it meant so much more because he was so good. It's not quite the same as Tom Brady with all the postseason winning, for sure. Purple Kool-Aid, Rodgers, the biggest thing, although he's got all-time great arm. Yeah, definitely. He's incredibly unlikable. Yes. And yeah, but see, I think that that's what everybody thinks, right? Is like, he's super, super talented and Vikings fans love to hate him and, so forth. So I think that's great. 1216 Vivek, did Jim Harbaugh have anything to do with Chad Alexander withdrawing? Jim was interviewed in 2022, so he knows the power structure the Wilfs want. I mean, I would have to be purely speculating on that. I don't know why Chad Alexander decided not to, and decided to stay with the Chargers organization. Maybe there was some discussion there about his role and increasing that or whatever it might be, or I don't know. It's really hard to say because he's not going to announce it or tweet it. So he's going to keep that to himself, but I don't think that Jim Harbaugh would have a lot to do with it. I don't know. Jim ended up in a good place for him, and the Vikings ended up in a good place, I think, too, with their coach. Rach found the draft to be underwhelming overall and the Grenard trade to be terrible in terms of value. Bringing back Rob would be disappointing to me. So I don't see it in the same way because, one, I mean, underwhelming is fair. We don't know how the draft is going to play out, but we can say this, that it very clearly met the desires of what the coaching staff wanted. And one thing that we have not seen from the coaching staff in the draft is them buy into Kwesi's players. We did not see that. So with them having more of their hands on what they wanted, that to me is more pouring into these players to make it work out, as opposed to the minute they don't feel like the guy's got it, they just get rid of him, which they've done for years now. So I think playing to what the coaches wanted was important. We never know how a draft is going to go, but I think it's fair to look at, the Caleb Banks and, hey, was it a reach and that kind of thing and be disappointed. The Grenard trade, I just don't see it that way because you get $34 million in cap space, a couple of third round draft picks. I mean, and not having someone in front of Dallas Turner. So now the Dallas Turner free path to playing every snap at his rightful position. I think you do get more back in return. Now, is it an amazing return? Is it a first round draft pick? No, but I think that the Grenard trade is pretty defensible based on what you get for cap space and not having to pay Jonathan Grenard long term. So, I just look at the way that they handled this offseason. I think it was good. I really do. It was not exciting. It was not flashy, but it was the right way to go about it because you're going to be a team long term. And if you want to have cap space in the future and spend in free agency and possibly sign a quarterback and all those things, but also they didn't chop it all down and have us sitting here going, well, why did they get Kyler Murray in the first place? So for the record, I don't love trading Jonathan Grenard. I never loved it. If you go back and look at what I said, I was like, maybe you should just keep him because he's really good. But then when you see the gap in how much cap space they get and multiple top 100 picks, which I talk about all the time, those are the things that matter. They move the needle. So I was okay with what they ended up with. Don't love giving it to Philly. Don't love having to do it, but you can see the vision of why they did. Purple Kool-Aid not saying that he'll turn into Andy Reid or turn into him, but Andy Reid was known for years as the guy who couldn't get over the hump. He got his guy and made magic. Yeah, you're going to coach for a really long time if you're Kevin O'Connell, and there are mistakes that we have picked apart in many different ways, but that doesn't mean you need to make them again. And his ability to self-evaluate, his ability to take the next step himself as a coach will be what determines whether he gets to a different place or not. I mean, yeah, okay. Yes, you're playing this game of quarterback bouncing around all the time, but with someone like Murray, and it was his draft pick of JJ McCarthy, so you got to make it work. That's number one. But I think that some of those other things, lessons learned along the way, can be applied. And I felt at times last year there were similar mistakes that had been made in previous years. And then toward the end of the season, it was almost like a light bulb went on of you can win a game by just grinding somebody to death. You're allowed to do that. And Gary Kubiak was great at it. Stefanski was great at it. That whole tree, Clint Kubiak. And it felt like, I think he's sort of understanding that, which is not what you want to do every week. You want to throw for 500 yards and score 50 points, but sometimes you have to win the game that's in front of you. And taking the responsibility to kind of change offensive line coach, bring in somebody who might know more than you, that's about the run game. And that's good stuff. That's stuff that is a little bit showing progress. Friends of Taz preseason will be fun. We'll get to watch 3 first-round quarterbacks play in Brosmer. Taz, I don't know, man. I don't know. The way that Kevin O'Connell handles the preseason, I'm not sure you're going to see much of. Whoa. That was some crazy, huge lightning. I don't know if you guys, or thunder. I didn't see the lightning, but I don't know if you guys heard that. That was crazy. That came out of nowhere. So if I lose power or something, I apologize. But it's been a long stream. It scared me. Anyway, I think you're going to see a lot of Brosmer. I don't know how much. Well, really, in my opinion, JJ McCarthy should be playing the first 2 quarters of every game. I think that he needs that, and I think he should be doing that. But will we see Murray? We might know everything we need to know about a quarterback competition by how much Kyler Murray plays. Skull Shadow says, I think that the choice will be McKay will be the choice. John McKay of the Rams. Why not try NFL bloodlines at GM? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be too concerned about who his dad is. John McKay, though, coming from a premier franchise, the premier franchise in the NFL, the Los Angeles Rams, That's, I mean, bring a lot of what they do over here is a pretty good logic. And I think the same goes for Nolan Teasley from Seattle. Hunter, what do I think the Rob's chances are at GM? I think they're okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Sometimes, so I get behind because I'm trying to answer questions and then I'm missing something that you guys are saying that's very funny like 20 minutes later. So hold on. Let me compose myself because you guys are extremely funny. What do I think of Rob's chances at GM? I think that he has a very high percentage chance of staying at the top in terms of decision maker in one way or the other, whether it's being named GM or whether it's being above the GM. Because of the way he handled this offseason, I think he got very high marks from everybody in the building. And even, from someone like myself, I get I'm not in total disagreement with the comment about, Jonathan Grenard. That's a hard one to take on, but you kind of have Juwan Jennings because of Jonathan Grenard, and you have Jacoby Thomas, and you have someone for next year, and you have other free agents for next year. And then you go, oh, I kind of get it. So then it's Jonathan Grenard for like 5 people, which makes it a little bit different. I think Rob has a very good chance to be at the top of the food chain. So when I was talking about Roger Goodell and I was talking about him being overly litigious early in his life as the commissioner, and I said he used to suspend everybody for an ounce of weed or whatever. And I'm being informed by the chat that that's a lot. So look, I've switched over recently to start drinking some Sprite Zero, trying to reduce a little bit of how much caffeine I drink at night, trying to sleep a little better. It's all about self-improvement in the off season. This is as intense as it gets around here. So sorry to you aficionados of the weed game. Clearly I know about football and not other things. Steven says the Steelers had Styx Renegade song playing during their picks this past year. What song will be playing for the Vikings 2028? Purple Rain is a little emotional. Purple Rain is like a really, moving tune. So I don't know if they'll be playing Purple Rain. I mean, Let's Go Crazy is probably the most obvious, but that would be great. Someone to come on with, it's got to be Prince. It has to be Prince. I would love to see them mix and match though, because there's let's get some Husker Du in there. Like there's a great history that's not just Prince, and all the teams play Prince all the time, which is great. But I would love to see, take the Hell's Bells, just all the teams. Take the AC/DC and Metallica and Crazy Train, get that stuff out of there and have just all Minneapolis music. Because in LA, that's kind of what they do. The LA teams usually have, they've got a huge catalog, but so does Minnesota. Get into some deep cuts, get into some cool stuff. Skull Shadow haven't had a good Coller rant lately. Choose a topic and go off. I don't think that's how the rants, see, that's the thing. If there's a rant, it's authentic. That's where it came from. The reason that there hasn't been a rant lately is because it's the off season, and usually in the off season, they don't do anything that makes me go insane. So in the regular season, it's different. Everyone is exhausted. It's super intense. It's pretty crazy. And you guys have been pretty rational about this off season. I got to tell you the truth. It's a lot on you. When you guys are pretty rational about the off season, then I'm usually pretty calm over here too. Okay, now we're into weed how prices. It's not my game. It's not my game. Top 25 long snappers and holders. Yeah, that's where I would be if you guys weren't in the chat. Kit, who other than Jefferson should be assumed to be untouchable by the new GM? They got rid of Grenard already. I know they won't tank, but that doesn't mean they won't trim fat. Well, there's no one that they're going to get rid of right now. The roster is what it is. The new GM's not going to come in and be like, I don't like Todd, get rid of, that's just not going to happen. But in terms of next year, a lot could change. And where we're really going to see that play out is not in necessarily getting rid of people, but who they extend. O'Neal, Cashman, Van Ginkel, Isaiah Rodgers. There's a lot of guys whose contracts are coming up that I mean, they could give extensions to now, or they could just let it play out. And I think if you're the new GM, you want to let it play out. It also kind of gives you plausible deniability to kick it down the road when you're talking to their agent and like, hey, the GM just got here. He's not going to sign people to huge extensions. But you could see a big overhaul in the way the roster looks, depending on how things go, if they don't sign people to big contract extensions. But in terms of untouchable, it probably is only Jefferson is untouchable. They won't be getting rid of Dallas Turner. He's on his rookie contract. Or Donovan Jackson. That wouldn't make any sense either. But like Jefferson is the one that you wouldn't trade and you're not going to cut and you're going to try to extend as soon as you can for sure. Joker, my NFC North win projections, Bears 9, Packers 10, Lions 11, Vikings 13. This is maybe a slightly biased, take there, but 13 seems a little high for me, even in the best case scenario for the Vikings, looking at their schedule. I mean, but the rest, everyone could be right there. Yeah. Purple Kool-Aid, in Teddy's preseason prior to the knee exploding, it looked like he was finally dialing in the deep ball. Oh, the San Diego game. Yeah. I mean, I remember that quite well. I was not here yet. I was actually studying to come here to cover the Vikings when that happened. So I was watching that game and I was like, man, exactly what we were talking about. Like Teddy, he's on the way. So yeah, I think what you're getting at talking about him overrated is that he was really, really well liked. But when I got here, I mean, most people's take on Teddy was that he was a really good game manager, that was a great leader, and had kind of a clutch gene to him, came through late in that game against Seattle with a big throw to Kyle Rudolph, and played exactly the way Mike Zimmer wanted a quarterback to play. That was the thing about Teddy, is that with the scenario with Adrian Peterson running more times than anyone else in the NFL that year, Zimmer having an elite defense, 2015, like that's how they wanted to win. They wanted Teddy to throw for 160 yards, convert a few third downs, don't make a mistake, kick a field goal and win, right? Like, and it worked then. I think as time went by, it wouldn't have worked forever and he would have needed to grow. He looked like he was on that trajectory, but he is, from everything that I've ever learned about Teddy Bridgewater, as great of a leader as you'll ever find anywhere. The entire locker room was totally bought into Teddy Bridgewater, and that matters, right? So he didn't have the physical gifts that was going to take him over the top, though. And he wasn't going to be Drew Brees with his accuracy. He could wobble the ball a little bit, right? But I do think he was on a very good trajectory, and so was the roster. That was another thing, is like that roster in 2017, they reached that while paying Sam Bradford. They reached that while paying Sam Bradford. If they didn't have that, they could have added even more talent to 2017 by the time Teddy got there. So that's always going to be a crazy one to think about. Not sure what you mean, Dr. Smug. Anyone else think involving KOC in the GM search is kind of bass backwards? Ass backwards, you mean? Yeah. I think that with KOC involved in the GM search, it's a pretty clear message that ownership is bought into the coaching staff, and they want KOC and Flores to lead this coaching staff for years to come. And they want the GM to be locked in with the coaching staff and pulling in the same direction. That's what it says to me when it means, and you got to see how the conversations go with GM candidates in KOC. You have to understand, like, do they kind of gel? Do they see things the same way? Because they're going to work together a lot. Rach, my issue with the Packers is that their defense is completely different in a bad way without Micah Parsons, and they're unlikely to start the season with it. Right. So if you start the season without Parsons and you end up being mediocre, that probably prevents them from having a super high ceiling. And then does he come back and is Micah Parsons from day one and just sacks the heck out of everybody, or does it take a little while to ramp up? Tucker Kraft, the same sort of story. I think that does add some volatility to them. I look at Jordan Love as someone who always gets you a certain amount of wins, kind of like Kirk Cousins would always get you a certain amount of wins. Matt LaFleur is the same way, but that's a fair point. Joe says Grenard only having one healthy season has to make trading him look smarter too. I would agree with that, when you do all the math, that it has to be factored in that he didn't have a lot of sacks and has been banged up throughout his career history. And they gave him $50 million guaranteed, $100 million overall. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot for someone who's sort of standing in the way of the guy that you want to be in that position. That's why it made sense to me. Purple Kool-Aid, maybe Sprite Zero will step up where Dr. Pepper did. I know, right? Give me somebody. I didn't know the song Closing Time was done by a Minneapolis band. Is that true? The Replacements would be cool. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. We could use a lot more Minneapolis music. I'm not like an aficionado of Minneapolis music. I just know there's a lot more great stuff than just Prince, who obviously is the best. Adam McCarthy needed the practice last year as well, yet he didn't play a single snap in preseason. He did play a couple snaps, but it wasn't many. I think he threw like 7 passes in preseason in one game. But I was saying going into that game, I think that he needs at least the first half. Now, does that change anything? I don't know. And they really couldn't afford to get him hurt, but now he should be playing a lot this year. Steven, we'll have to start thinking about Mr. Mankato candidates. Yeah, that's true. I got to see him at least in minicamp first. Give me a chance to see that. Joker, Teddy was ice cold under pressure and everyone loved him. It was going to work here. Even narcissistic Zimmer loved him. Yeah, Zimmer loved Sam Bradford too. I interviewed Bradford in 2018 or 2019 on the radio. I don't know if he's done any interviews since that. And he said that him and Zimmer really saw football a lot of the same way and got along really good. Like, they texted a lot and so forth. So you know what? I think it was 2 things. I think that Teddy had that dog in him, and I think that Sam Bradford had that dog in him. And Kirk never projected that. Like, Kirk is really tough and took a ton of hits, but he's a different kind of guy. Like, he's just not, he doesn't have that bully jock to him, which a lot of NFL players do. And I'm not saying that they are bullies necessarily, but that it's in there, right? Like, even when I have Jeremiah Searles on the show, like, you see that glimmer in his eye. Like, he wants to stuff me in a locker sometimes when we're going back and forth. And that's just not Kirk. Like, he is very kind of comfortable with him being a nerd dad guy. And that kind of, that's who he is. And he got more comfortable with that as he went along in Minnesota, because KOC was like, that's fine that's who you are. Like, you could be kind of quirky and funny. But I think what Zimmer wanted, Zimmer came up with like Troy Aikman as his quarterback when he was in Dallas. And then it was, what would it have been? Well, Andy Dalton, he didn't really have that. Was he there for Carson? No, I don't think he was there for Carson Palmer in Cincinnati. But, Zimmer, like, he's a psycho in a competitive way. And just like in general, yes. But I mean, like, he is one of the most competitive people you will ever find in your entire life. And that behavior does not translate to normal world, like being a psycho competitor. It translates in football, and Kirk just doesn't project that. So I think that always rubbed him the wrong way. But realistically, what annoyed Zimmer about Kirk was the contract. That was really what it was about. I think if he had signed for like this run-of-the-mill contract that was small and malleable, and Zimmer could keep his defense, he would have been much more on board with Kirk. Oh, thank you for the Game 7 update. All right. I will have to, I want to watch that. So I'm going to probably sign off here in just a second. I appreciate that. Dr. Smug, how did everyone like the schedule release? I thought it was really good. I thought it was creative. It looked good. It was fun using Will Reichard. I mean, people want sass. People want aggressiveness. They want to start stuff and, all that. That's not who the Vikings are with their social team, so they didn't do that, but I thought they executed it really nicely. Rach, I do think the Packers have a relatively high floor. Love is the best QB in the division. IMO with respect to LaFleur and Goff, and LaFleur is a good coach. Yep, so I agree with you, and that's why I had them as higher in my NFC power rankings, is because I just think they're more reliable, less volatile. Yeah, Chris Jericho showing up in the schedule release. That was good. I liked it. I thought they put a lot of work into it. It looked great. I mean, the way that they filmed it looked like a movie or something. It was well done. So anyway, all right. Well, I'm gonna bounce and catch the rest of this hockey game. And really great, really energetic conversation, guys. That was great. So the plan is to have Eric Edholm on the show. He power ranked the Vikings really not good after the draft. So we are going to hold some NFL.com friends of the show accountable tomorrow. And then Wednesday, another chat, and planning on Thursday, Manny Hill has agreed to pick the schedule on Thursday. So we'll get him in for some good discussion as well. Appreciate all of you stopping by and really appreciate all of you in the chat, keeping it energetic, keeping it fun, and having a really good conversation again tonight. So hoping to have many, many more throughout the offseason. Again, OTAs, mini camp, we'll have reports and stuff like that on the way. But I also really enjoy these nights where we're just having fun talking ball. So thanks everybody for that. And we'll talk to you again very soon. Football.